snow fell cold on a bitter night. John was gone for the morning light. They blame Karen, but it don't sit right. Too many secrets hid from sight. Oh, the badge runs deep, the law runs thin. They stack the deck, but truth won't bend. The judge looks away, the truth gets drowned. Ain't no justice in Canton Town. Proctor's story shifts and sways. Cameras vanish, records fade. The Alberts toast while the doubts grow strong. The folks still fight, won't be long. Oh, the badge runs deep, the law runs thin. They stack the deck, but truth won't bend. The judge looks away, the truth gets drowned. Ain't no justice in Canton Town. Proctor's story shifts and sways. Cameras vanish, records fade. The Alberts toast while the doubts grow strong. The folks still fight, won't be long. Oh, the badge runs deep, the law runs thin. They stack the deck, but truth won't bend. The judge looks away, the truth gets drowned. Ain't no justice in Canton Town.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, whoever you are, what if any you might be. And welcome to another wonderful week of Karen Read. What, if any, shenanigans will be pulled this week? I don't know, but something stupid will happen. Hey, Baba by the Sea. Betty Swallows. Just no. Top 40 stuff right there. Well, that's I like it. And Tom got assaulted by Trooper Hartman this morning when he was forcibly moved him across the street. Cop just assaulted Tommy. They told him he could stand at this corner Friday, then grabbed his arm and lifted him across the street. I think it's a disgrace what's happening in Massachusetts. We all do. Just that they don't even know where the First Amendment zone goes to is horrible. That no one can tell because of Bev's weird orders. And when you are 3 years into a media frenzy about how badly you treated a case, should you really play the role of Gestapo? Should you maybe tell Tom, hey, buddy, I know we said Friday, but we had a talk about it. Can you please move to the other side of the road? Then Tom would have said, okay. But they just want to be... I don't know what's wrong with these officers, but I get massive minus P energy from all of them. It's horrible that that you Did I forget to share the links? No, because Valhalla is here. I'm such a boomer. Well, I did share some links because Mo's here.
Yes.
Relax, Jamie. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just making sure we didn't cross streams while I was trying to get the chat up.
No, but I don't know. Did I share both links Friday?
You did. I think it was just the one that was the afternoon switched to the morning, and I wasn't paying attention until yesterday when I was like, "Oh, okay, I need to."
Yeah,
But
and Valhalla got mad at me, and then I made a new one. Did I get a haircut? Yes, I got a haircut last week. But thanks for noticing.
so
It's not
I
their
wonder
fault.
who
Michael
were.
P.
Oh.
we are experts, and we have to do this, and then start talking. And then there's a 5-second delay, so we'll still start talking anyway. It's not their fault. Micropene is a medical condition, and technically they were born that way. Yeah, but do they have to show it off that often? It's
Yeah, you would think that you wouldn't send photos of it if you were, worried it was short, a few inches or such.
AML off today, so you might get flooded bigger. Well, we'll take. I think you mean ML. But if any of Melon Little's cupcakes want to join the muffin tops, they are always more than welcome.
Yes, absolutely.
We are a big and diverse bakery.
We are.
Funny thing I noticed over the video weekend. God. Yeah, it's got one of those days. Someone started digging into that Burgess guy. The guy who's going to testify for Aperture.
Yeah, I had seen some of that, but I was at the mall. So I was trying to keep kids from spending a whole lot and finding, a full shirt if possible.
It's but I think Melanie is off today. But
cool.
at Training Melanie Little. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Good morning. Good to see you both. Good to see you, Cynthia Rose. And 9 months. That's one baby. Welcome, Jamie. I don't see any links. Well, they were in there.
Where? Because I clicked on the last one, the one before that, and then none of them were showing up. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm missing something.
Well, both Valhalla and Mo used them to set up their stream. So I bet you at some point they worked. Just not now. I know it's my mistake. I ruined it for you, Jamie. I know it's my mistake. No, but that Burgess, apparently he has either he's doing a lot of studying or he has weird different statements out there when and what he has a degree in. And again, just to because I saw someone ask on Twitter, you don't need a degree to be an expert. I could be called as an expert in baked goods.
Yeah, there's a difference between like book learning experts, but there's also lay people that have been brought in because of their, length of time in a certain subject or in a certain field. There is no accreditation process, but if you got a guy who's been a plumber for, 60 years and says, hey, that plumber did a crap job, you can say, in your experience, with your years of plumbing knowledge, he doesn't have to go to like the Vatican of plumbing college in order to be an expert.
Exactly. It's just experience a lot of times.
Just no, Brennan. But it's just weird. Why would you mention different studies and different exam or graduation dates in different cases? That's one of those things where you're sitting here thinking, "Oh my God, Alessi is gonna eat this guy raw,"
I hope so.
because it's so weird.
Don't say raw.
Yeah.
He's gonna.
Yeah,
Well, here's the
especially if
thing,
this
though.
is.
With Bev, like, do we think that she's really gonna let him have a robust cross like she says? Because honestly, she says that all the time, and then she shuts him right down.
Yeah, we'll get to him asking questions. She'll be like, "It's asked and answered. Move along. Do you understand the question? Oh, you don't? Okay, well, then let's move along."
Can you answer that? Can you answer that?
I would be like, sidebar, you said you're letting this in. You said that I could do this, so you just zip it and sit there.
Ashley, the tail light lady, said she used 23 pieces to put the tail light back together. So then there's still 16 pieces out there. No, they found 16 extra pieces. What they're from, who knows? It might be from a drinking glass. That's what Wendy Murphy, idiot extraordinaire, thinks. It might be from, I don't know, the glass shard fairy, who sprinkles. Do you sometimes wake up and you just feel like you have glass splinters in your eyes? That's the glass shard fairy who just puts that in your eyes while you're sleeping. Maybe she didn't grind it up enough so it couldn't get into the eyes of people. There's a lot of possibilities out there. None of them it comes from the tail light and is conducive to prove that John O'Keefe was hit by a car. But yeah, she found 16 other pieces of glass that no one knows what is. And did we finish with her Friday? We didn't do that, right?
I don't think we finished, although I think we can stop the case because I was on the Twit-Twat just this morning and Caffey Daffy was like, it has been conclusively proven that, the car hit John. Anyone who says no, they're not watching the trial.
She's
We've
crazy.
got glass.
I did
And
a
I was
video
like,
on her this morning because
oh,
I saw the same and I lost my mind. Thank you
They
so
haven't
much,
even
Tammy, for your-
proven a collision yet. What is she
No.
talking about?
Thank you, Tammy Fayette, for the super chat. Happy Monday to you as well.
Thanks, Tammy.
And I
Yeah,
can see you have sent some over on, I think it's Valhalla's channel. Or is it Mo's channel?
it's not mine, so it has to be Valhalla's, I believe.
Well, I'll wait till he gets here in a couple of hours. And Stacy Labruno, good morning, Baker and all. Are we ready for more shenanigans? I'm actually not. I want to.
No.
Me neither.
I want a day where questions are asked and answered. I will say I like the state's witnesses that are professionals, not the cops, because they are a-holes, but the other guys are saying, I don't know, I don't care, I don't know, it's not my job. At least they don't sit there and spin a yarn about whatever happens to try and make the case look better. They are not there to back up the cops to try and clean their case up, and I like that. But I hate Brennan.
I hate him too.
Yeah.
But I will appreciate that he is moving a lot quicker than Lally did.
But the problem is he's moving nowhere.
He's going nowhere, that's
No.
for sure. But it's not we're not sitting here listening to the same droning on and on. Like, he's kind of getting to the point and he's getting out, and we're not like, so.
Yeah, and I would like a little more defense sass, because with her highly biased.
Unmuted.
I don't hate you, Tammy. But I want to wait till Valhalla is here so I can pull it up and he can thank you personally. I heard the rumor about it, but I don't know how true it is, because the day she did her, hey everyone, could you please be nice to everyone? That was like 3 days after it supposedly had it happened, and I have never heard about a juror doing that. I've heard the rumor, but I don't know if there's any truth to it. That's
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye.
Are they all using Yanetti's license? He should be the one lobbing at Beveridge, then start acting a fool. Few flaming bags of crap too. Well, then they all will be removed because he is carrying that pro hog. So that
Okay,
would be a little bit of a problem.
Baker, I did run into something on X, and is the picture of Karen Reed at Whole Foods with Jackson, is that a deep fake like the last time they had Karen and Jackson at a club?
What were they doing? at Whole
Go back and watch the video I made this
Is there
morning.
a
I think
Whole
I
Foods
brought it up.
Oh, wait,
and,
wait, say the line that you used with Jamie. I demand it. I have a great show. You should watch it sometime.
Oh yeah.
Look, I was doing videos about ancient shamanic use of ayahuasca, so sorry I missed it.
Yeah.
But no, I
You
saw
can really
that
watch his
picture.
videos, Mo.
I saw that picture, and that picture is made by Julie Carr, who is, first of all, a horrendous person. Second of all, so anti-Karen Reed that I think only Krusty the Clown is more anti-Karen Reed than she is. There's absolutely no truth to it. Kathy Daffy, when people started pressing on her, she said, it's a parody. Well, then you have to put it in the text. This is a parody. But
Yeah.
they are hateful, spiteful, evil women. Sorry, not misogynist, because these heifers are the worst. Baker, you're the whacker to my weed. Thank you, Zach.
Rania, give your attendance.
This isn't the matter is on for trial.
Thank you. Good morning, counsel. Good morning, Ms. Reed.
Good morning, jurors.
Oh, no
Appreciate
sidebar.
you here, ready, willing, and able to get started early, so we're happy about that. Thank you. I do have to ask you those questions. Were you all able to follow my instructions and refrain from discussing this case with anyone since we left here on Friday? Everyone said yes or nodded affirmatively. Were you also able to follow the instructions and refrain from doing any independent research or investigation into this case? Yes. Everyone said yes or nodded affirmatively. Did anyone happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case since we left on Friday? Everyone said no or should say yes. Thank you. Mr. Brennan, your next witness, please. Oh, Mr. Lally.
Your Honor, call Nicholas Bradford.
Oh, so we did finish.
Oh,
What do you say?
Bradford.
Bradford.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give to the court and the jury in the matter now pending shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury, spelling your last name?
Yep, my name is Nick Bradford.
There's only one Whole Foods store in Boston that carries Grey Goose, and it's not the one they would likely go to since they are staying in the back bay near another one. I never ever thought for a second that it was real. When I saw it was from Julie Carpenter or whatever her name is, I knew it was BS.
Bradford.
What do you do for work, sir?
I'm a DNA expert for Bodie Technology
And
He's the
where is
guy who's
Bodie
going to say
Technology
that
located?
the
in Lowton,
head
Virginia.
had
And where did
female
you go to school,
DNA.
sir?
I went to school at Mercier's College.
Well, it's really bad optics if you're in court for a case where you're drinking. I don't care, but I know a lot of people does. Remember the first trial, they wanted to find her guilty because she was drunk driving. But everyone, I don't care. It's bad optics.
College in Erie, Pennsylvania, for a bachelor.
But isn't it defamation? At what point do Kathy Daffy reads into defamation when she not clearly calls it parody? Because she's also implying that Karen Reed and AJ is banging, which I think is horrendous when he has a wife
I
and two kids.
think Alan Jackson would have more of an angle because Karen Reed is considered now a public figure, and there's a lot more that you can get away with for a public figure. I do think that the illusion that he is doing something unethical is more of something Alan Jackson could, because that's his profession, that's his professional
Yeah.
thing. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
They had that
That's
thing where
Information
Melanie.
is hard to prove. Hard to prove.
Well, they had that time where they claimed that him and Melanie Little was going to a motel on a weekend, and it's just technically perjury. I'm a woman, I agree. Kathy and co, all that. Thank you so much for a month, but it's just how much BS can these a-holes let out there? At least use the allegedly. When I say allegedly, Kathy Daffy is functionally slow in French. I say allegedly.
Bachelor in forensic biology and a master's in forensic molecular biology from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C.
And following your education, where did you go to work?
I started at Bodie in about 2009.
And so did you work at Bodie prior to your graduation?
Yes.
And how long have you worked there at Bodie?
Since then, I spent 2 years at the Pennsylvania State Police about 2021.
And when you joined Bodie Technologies, what was your position and title that you were initially hired for?
I was initially a DNA technician
And when did you become an analyst?
in 2014.
And what is the difference between a technician and an analyst?
The technicians operate the robotic equipment in the labs and assist with paperwork and various reagent duties and things like that.
And what does an analyst do?
An analyst analyzes the DNA evidence that's submitted from various police agencies from around the country. We come to court to testify and do statistical analysis of any comparisons that we might.
He's going to testify that the apparent hair found, was a human hair that has mitochondrial DNA that could indicate John O'Keefe. He did it the last time as well.
Now, if you could, so please describe for the jury the training that you underwent initially as a technician.
As a technician, it was probably maybe 2 or 3 months training process that involved various reading of the manuals for the robotics and various written and verbal exams.
Now, is there a continuing educational component of Bodie?
Yes, for DNA analysts, we have proficiency testing twice a year. We have to do a certain number of hours of continuing education, so that would be things like conferences, things like that. And we have to do scientific literature reviews, so we have to keep up with scientific articles 4 times a year.
Now, if you could just expound a little as far as what exactly does that continuing educational component consist of, as far as conferences and scientific
We don't
literature
care.
review, what specific
We
areas
don't
are
care.
reviewing and going conferences are?
Yeah, so that would be areas specific to forensic DNA testing.
Now, how many analysts work at Bodie?
Somewhere between 60 and 75, maybe.
If you could, please describe for the jury what kind of lab Bodie is.
So Bodie is a private DNA lab, and we take casework from various police agencies across the country, and we also have groups that work on international cases and things like that.
Now, you mentioned some of your work is submitted from law enforcement agencies around the country. Is that the entirety of the work, or where do some of the other pieces come from?
Yeah, so like I said, some of it is international, and then we also do some research work as well.
Now, what type of analysis do you currently perform at Bodie?
So I'm part of the customized casework group. So we take generally one-off cases or smaller, more complex cases, and then we work through those.
Now, specifically with reference to DNA analysis, can you explain to the jury first in sort of general terms, how is that analysis performed?
Yes, so for DNA analysis, what we're trying to do is obtain a DNA profile from a piece of evidence and then potentially compare that with a reference sample from a known individual.
Now, is the Bodie lab accredited?
Yes.
And by whom is it accredited?
Through the National Institute of Standards.
Now, within the Bodie lab, are there certain steps that are taken to prevent against contamination?
Yes, so at every step of the testing process, we have positive and negative controls. The evidence room is a secure room, so only a handful of people have access to that room. And then everything that we would need to test, we would sign out, and that would be recorded on the chain of custody. The building itself is secure, so you need to swipe your badge to sign in. We wear protective equipment through all parts of the process. So we have gloves, goggles, lab coat, hairnets, masks. And during, after.
That's because this guy is a nothing witness. He's just going to sit there and say, yeah, there's mitochondrial DNA.
And
Right,
then
reports, all of
Leslie's
our
going to
results
come
are-
up and say, but that could be from anyone birthed by Peg O'Keefe. And he's going to have to say, yes.
Yeah.
That being said, he looks like he goes out in the sun about as much as I do. Welcome,
looks a little
fellow
tired.
daywalker.
Carla, we have sped up because it's just his sequum vitale.
reviewed prior to being reported.
Now, to that point, sir, is there a review process that your work and any analyst work undergoes at the Bodie labs?
So the final step would be a technical and an administrative review.
Oh, sorry,
Can you
we
describe that
started
process as far
before
as the
you.
technical review and review in general at Bodie?
Yeah, so
I'll
we
forgive you.
submit a
Thank
case
you.
file with a report and all of our conclusions. And then another.
Oh, and
I love this song. It's awesome. Thank you, Tammy. And a $2. Is it a super sticker or is it just an empty chat?
I think it's an empty chat.
Well, thank you, Tammy. I appreciate you so much.
Analyst goes through everything and make sure that they agree with
We're
everything
set
that.
up because he's just going back through his, I graduated high school. I'm an honor roll student. What if any snow? So when he gets to the real testimony, we'll get there. But if you guys would like to see his, sped up CV, this might not be the channel for you.
We submitted.
I think you made reference to this a little earlier in your testimony, but as part of the accreditation process, do you want to go proficiency testing?
Yes, twice a year.
And can you explain to the jury that proficiency testing process?
Yes. So twice a year, we get what's essentially a mock case submitted from an outside vendor that we treat as if it were an actual case. We go through and do all the testing that we would normally do, and then submit that back to the vendor, and they compare the results to the known results of what they should be.
Now, what areas have you specifically undergone proficiency testing in?
So everything that I am trained and signed off in.
In DNA specifically, is that correct?
Yes.
And have you successfully completed each of those proficiency tests that you've taken?
Yes.
Now, you made reference to this a little earlier, but can you explain to the jury what are positive and negative controls?
Right. So positive controls we use to make sure that the various testing steps that we're performing are working as we expect. So if we have a positive control, we would expect to see the DNA profile that we intend to see in that positive sample. Negative samples we use to make sure that there aren't any sources of contamination along the way. The chemicals that we're using aren't potentially contaminated, or that maybe samples were switched or something along the way.
He looks like
Now,
Bill
when you
Gates
were
if that
assigned
whole
work within the
Microsoft thing
DNA
didn't
unit
work out.
at Bodie Technologies, where do you retrieve that item, or where do you retrieve those items physically from?
Yeah, so those would be delivered to our secure evidence room, and then any testing performed, we would
We
need to
all
sign that out,
decided to
and that
go
would
with
be
the
recorded on
Commodore
chain of custody.
64 instead.
Now, the secure evidence room, is that temperature controlled at all?
Yes, we have just basic climate control as well as freezers and refrigerators.
And the freezers, refrigerators are commonly referred to as cold storage. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, why is items of evidence stored in cold storage?
Certain items of evidence are stored cold because things like heat, UV light, and moisture can cause microbial activity or degrade the DNA. So we would not get the highest quality results that we would want.
Now, when you retrieve items from the cold storage or from the secured evidence room, how are those items packaged when you receive them for DNA testing?
So they're usually, however, they're packed from, like, for example, the police agency that sends it to us, they'll pack them according to their guidelines and standards, and then they're sent to us and we store them in the freezer. And then when they're signed out on our end, we just have a basic container that we put them in to keep the case together.
Now, sir, what is DNA?
So DNA is basically the manual for a living organism. Most of the DNA is contained within the nucleus of every cell, or pretty much every cell. And it contains all the information that is needed to make an individual.
Is DNA the same in every cell of a person's body?
Yes.
And how many steps are included in DNA testing?
So forensic DNA testing, the testing that we did, there are basically 4 steps. So there's DNA extraction, quantification, amplification, and profile detection.
Now, can you describe for the jury what each of those steps are and sort of what they entail?
Yes. So DNA extraction is we are basically trying to separate out the DNA from everything else. So all the other parts of the cell or any other material that might be part of the evidence. So we're left with just the DNA. Next is quantification. And we are trying to figure out how much DNA we have to work with. The steps further down the line are calibrated to a certain amount of DNA input. If we add too much DNA, it can cause problems. So we need to know how much we have to work with. And then the next step is amplification. So this is when we take 20 to 25 different locations within the genome that we're interested in looking at. And we make millions and millions of copies of each of those locations. And in each one of those copies, there's a fluorescent tag that's embedded into each one. So then that leads to the final step of profile detection, where we separate those fragments out by size, and that fluorescent tag allows us to identify those particular
Photoshop
locations.
a helmet on him.
Now, sir, in January of
if you have a
2024,
DNA
were you
test.
assigned to perform some work on a lab case number of your Bodie lab?
Who, if anyone, are the antis? It's my nickname for the anti-Karen Reed people. More specifically, the Caffey Daffies, Wendy Murphys, Doink the Clowns, Human Thumbs, Krusty Panties of the world.
Lab case number CCA 2416-0023, pertaining to this defendant, Karen Reed.
Yes.
Now, you received those items for testing from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory, correct?
Correct.
Now, do you also, when you receive items from an outside agency, do you also receive a corresponding submitting agency case number from that agency?
Yes.
And in this case, that was Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory, lab number 22-02184. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, what type of work were you assigned to do in this case?
So in this case, I was assigned to look at an extract that was submitted from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, as well as a hair, and then 2 reference samples that were also submitted.
Now, could you explain to the jury the process that you used to analyze, in general terms, evidence in this case?
Yes. So generally, we follow that same process, with the exception of the extract that was submitted. Since the extraction process was already completed, we did not need to do that, and we could move straight to quantification. And then we did the entire process for the hair, as well as the reference samples.
Now, you made brief reference to it a moment before, but was there a known standard that was done in this case?
Yes.
And did another analyst test and report the results from the known blood standard of John O'Keefe?
Correct.
And how was that done?
Yes. So the entirety of the testing was performed at the state lab, and they submitted the final profile to us for comparison.
Now, what is a DNA profile?
So a DNA profile is basically just a list of all the variants at those 24 or 25 different locations that we're
Do
interested
you think
in.
we really needed this from
And the
3
entirety
separate
of those different variations are what
Well,
makes the
why
DNA
did we go
profile
from a medical
individual
examiner
or
to a
unique.
tail lightologist?
Now, as far as
to-
when you're looking or
this
analyzing
douche.
or examining
I mean,
a DNA profile, can you
No
describe
offense
to
to
the
you,
jury,
sir. I'm
what does
sure
it
you're
look
not a
like? What are
douche,
you
but
looking at?
So when we're looking at a DNA profile, it's essentially a graph with a series of peaks across the
I
horizontal
like a suit
axis.
tie combo.
And those are
Reminds me of
those
the
correspond to the
early
length of the
aughts for
DNA
some
fragments that we
reason.
amplified.
Like this
Early
guy's
blood.
bringing Zima to the
Those are
party.
assigned a number based on the length of that that fragment, and those numbers are
He strikes me
what we
more of a
refer to as the
scared-off apple
alleles.
kind of guy.
And those numbers are assembled
Fair
into
point.
essentially
Fair
a chart,
point.
and that's the DNA profile.
Now, could you
Perhaps
please
even
describe
Bartles
to the jury
James
the
to making
process
me
of
happy.
comparison between a known standard and an evidence sample?
Yes. So when we have an evidence sample,
This fall,
we
I used
need
to drink
to compare it to a reference sample.
Now all we have is White Claws. I demand
and
we go
then-
back.
So what we do is
Some
we
things don't
take those
improve
two
with
tables
progress.
that I mentioned, one from the evidence sample and one from the reference sample, and we put them next to each other and do a comparison to see if the reference
David
profile
knows.
is potentially part of the
David
evidence
Nelson knows.
profile. And then if the two are
True.
consistent, then we would need to do a statistical calculation to determine the strength of the match. For example, if one in every 3 people would be a potential match, then that's not very strong. So we need to we have to have some sort of mathematical weight to describe the potential match.
Now, if you could again, sir, explain to the jury what was
And I
your
was
role
told there would be no
in the
more
testing in
NAF.
this case?
Yes. So my role was to analyze the DNA
Hey, Susan.
profiles
Susan.
and then do the comparisons.
Now, what items specifically did you receive for DNA testing in this case?
So yes, like I mentioned,
I bet you he doesn't. I bet you he keeps his socks on.
You know what? He's probably got like 7 kids, like Mo.
You think he's a sleeper?
I think so. I think that dude's probably reproduced more than the rest of us on this panel, aside from Mo, of course. She doesn't.
Well,
she
well,
always
honey,
messes up the curve.
Honey, you know, I need to do some testing on DNA for work. So
He's
not
Nick
like-
Cannon levels. He's just got like 3 more on the way this year from different women. He's
Stop
slaying.
it. No, not this guy. We would find something else like that. That'd be hilarious.
you know, he's so sad because he's sitting here thinking, first of all, it's Lally. I'm going to talk for hours about what, if any. And then Alessi's going to stand up and I need the donut pillow when I drive home.
Yeah, but this man brings some Zimas, some Kenny G. He's scoring with all the ladies. He's like, I work in true crime DNA analysis. He is getting more ladies with the true crime, hysteria.
His
Those rest
sister
of
wife
us.
kind of. He might be that guy that's got like different area codes. You know what I mean? He's got like
Oh
a
my
fake
goodness.
life. He's got a second life in the Philippines that
Look,
nobody
he
knows
looks
about.
like a sad puppy. That has to work on a lot of women. We like kitten videos.
and we received the hair. We received the 2 reference samples. We received an extract from a taillight, as well as the negative control that was associated with that. And then we also received a reference profile from the state lab.
Now, starting with what your lab has labeled as EO2, that has a corresponding State Police Crime Lab item number 3-1.1. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what was the description of that item, EO2 3-1.1?
So that was the extract of the sample from the passenger side taillight of the vehicle.
And was there any further description or of that vehicle as far as the plate number? make,
Yes, there was a
model?
plate number associated with it.
Okay. And do you recall what the plate number was?
So that would be 3GC684.
And did you receive 2 buckle samples identified as RO3 and RO4?
Yes.
And what was RO3 identified as?
So that was a buccal swab from Yuri Bugetic.
And what was RO4 identified as?
So that was a buccal
Yuri
swab
who?
from Michael Proctor.
Bugetic?
And then that
yeah.
extract portion, that was the part that was labeled
Close
as
enough.
EO2.
So
Is that
full
correct?
bukkake.
Correct.
I mean, at this point,
And
I
can you
would.
please explain to the jury what an
He
extract
got
is?
better. He got closer
So
than
like,
Julie
yeah,
Alberts
like I
did.
mentioned, an extract is essentially it's a
I
tube
love
with
that
a
she
small
really
amount of
thought
liquid in
about
it,
it. And then
and inside that liquid is
cocky.
the DNA that was extracted from
She
the
was
evidence
confident
sample.
with it.
Now, the known
That's such a
standard of
me thing to
Mr. John
do.
O'Keefe, that had an item number as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what was that item
Yuri
number
pathetic.
first from
Good
the
one,
State
knife.
Police, Massachusetts
That's
State
good.
Police Crime Laboratory?
So that was
That's good.
8-1.1.1.
And did your lab, Bodie
Is it
Technologies,
life
have a
or life?
corresponding item number associated with?
Well, it's if you're American, it's probably leaf. But
Live.
if
Well,
you're
that's what I would think, but
if
I
you're
would
saying
say
it
live.
correctly, it's life.
see, that's what I was
No.
going to say. I was going to
That's
say I'm
correctly.
probably saying it wrong because I'm American, but Baker's going to tell me how I'm going to say it right.
That's
Life.
not how you spell life. That's not how you spell life. Life is Life, Baker.
We always say it how it's spelled. Chattanooga.
Pronounced leaf.
See?
Pronounced
He says leaf.
leaf. Ha.
Ha.
Well,
Got him.
it's a Nordic name. You stole it from us.
Lawyered.
The guy
Baker's now telling him how his name's wrong.
yeah. Well, yesterday I had to tell someone how you made babies. So it's a full service channel. The guy
Wait,
who
I missed
found
the one episode I really needed to watch. Damn
no,
it.
you don't need to learn
I
how
think
to
you
make
got
babies.
it figured out, Mo.
Yeah.
You,
No,
you
I'm
need the
completely
opposite.
confused.
You need contraception on a budget with Jamie.
I'm good at that.
But the guy who found Greenland was Leif den Lykkelig, Leif the Happy. Or maybe he was he was the one who found America before that weird Italian
Thought it
guy
was
did it.
that
Eric,
was the red beard guy. Leif,
yeah, I thought it was
Redbeard, Leif.
Redbeard.
No, he found
Like-
Greenland and his son Leif den Lykkelig. But again, you Americans steal, it's cultural appropriation, and then you change our names.
We make
Fine,
it
then
better.
don't need another hot
No, we just
pocket.
used
I
the
dare you.
Massachusetts lab number for that.
And that known standard from John O'Keefe, did that appear to be a standard
Exactly.
single source
Life.
profile?
Yes.
And what is a single source profile?
So a single source profile is essentially a DNA profile from one individual, as opposed to a DNA profile that could be a mixture of multiple individuals.
Now, what does STR stand for?
Stands for short tandem repeat.
And can you please describe that short tandem repeat process for the jury?
Yes. So like I mentioned, what we're doing with STR, short tandem repeat testing, is we're amplifying a number of locations in the genome, and then we're separating them out by size. Now, the reason we do that is because at the at the DNA level, those regions of the genome have a series of genetic base pairs that repeats over and over again in sequence. So they're short tandem repeated DNA sequences. And the number of times that sequence repeats at that location is what we call the allele. So if the sequence repeated 5 times, we would call that allele 5. And that the summation of all those alleles is what makes the DNA profile.
And what is an STR mix?
So are you referring to the computer program, StarMix?
Yes, STAR mix, excuse me.
Yes. Okay.
Lolly, you have one job. You only have like
Star
3
Mix-
witnesses.
StarMix is a great Haribo product, or like you Yanks will call it, Haribo. Because
Like
there's
gummy worms.
Yeah, Haribo is great.
Oh, the
Haribo.
the gummy
Harbo.
bears.
Haribo.
Okay, then how do you say it?
Haribo.
You just left out all the letters? Like, screw the
Eyeball.
R. We
Eyeball.
don't need an R in there.
Or the A.
Yeah.
Starbucks.
Haribo.
Haribo.
Okay, I just say they make
Haribo.
really good gummy bears.
Yeah,
do
but
make good gummy
they
bears.
actually have a mix with where there's the little foam fried eggs and all the gummies and stuff like that. That's called Star Mix. That's one of the
Right.
best.
Fried eggs. Gummies.
I haven't
The
Star Mix
gummies. I
in
know
my
what you're talking
life.
about. I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. It took me a minute.
Jamie
It's like
makes.
the-
Oh, I have never had a piece of candy
Not
in my
on
life. How would I
Amazon.
know?
Looking this up right now.
I don't know what's going on.
So they named their candy
so,
bag after a mixture of DNA.
When we're dealing
That's
with
gross.
No, I think,
mixture,
they were first.
profiles, so that would be
They were first.
DNA evidence profiles
Before
where
DNA,
more
I
than
doubt
one
it.
person's DNA is all mixed together. We need to be able to try to separate that out as best we can. We use a computer program called STRMix or StarMix, and that uses various mathematical calculations that allow us to make the best use of that mixture data that we can. And it allows us to run those statistical calculations to reference profiles as well.
Now, item EO2 from the passenger side taillight of the vehicle. What did you conclude as to that profile?
Yeah, so that was a mixture of 3 individuals, including at least 1 male.
Now, if you could, please sort of walk the jury through that process in making a profile comparison from
God,
Oh my
the profile
God,
from the
no.
passenger side tail light of the defendant's vehicle and your other
Someone
submitted
bring me
samples.
gummy bears, please.
Yes. So when we're using StarMix and we're doing a comparison, we have the StarMix output. And essentially what that's doing is we input, based on the DNA profile that we observe, the number of contributors that we would expect to be there. So in this case, we would say there were 3 individuals. So the StarMix software will break out those 3 different components and give probabilities to each different allele combination. So we would take the reference profile and then compare that to the output from the StarMix program to see if there's a potential inclusion.
Now, you mentioned a little bit about statistical calculations. How are those statistical calculations done?
Yes, so once we...
What's happening? We are discussing which mixture from Haribo is the best and how to pronounce names and places correctly, not the American way. And then we are listening to a guy who is boring everyone to tears.
We determine that there's a potential inclusion in the mixture.
Okay, Baker,
will,
here's the other question I
run what's
have.
called a likelihood ratio.
Do you take
So
the
essentially
green
what we're doing
gummy
there
bears
is
out
we're
because
doing,
they're gross?
a likelihood ratio is we're comparing 2.
No, I eat gummy bears by a handful.
Oh, you got to eat the colors exclusively.
Yeah, like
No.
reds with reds, you know, pineapples
Yeah,
with pineapples, and then the greens you chuck to your children because they're gross.
No, you eat it. That's weird.
I have to say, I don't know about you, but I don't see color, so
Okay.
2 different explanations for the evidence profile variation. So one of those
Baker's
explanations
colorblind.
would be that
Official.
in this case, the DNA profile is a mixture of one of those reference
no
samples
race
that we're
and
comparing
gender for me.
and 2 unknown unrelated individuals.
Confirmed.
The other explanation would be that it was 3 unknown unrelated individuals. So we compare those 2 and we determine the ratio of which one is more likely.
Where do those statistical numbers or calculations, where do they come from?
So they're all based in the fact that we know how common the different alleles at each location are within the population. So we can do a lot of mathematics and figure out how rare or common different alleles might be.
Now, sir, in your comparison analysis between the taillight sample and the known standard from John O'Keefe, what conclusions did you make from your analysis or comparative analysis between those 2?
Between John O'Keefe and the mixture profile, John O'Keefe could not be excluded as a potential contributor to that mixture profile.
And as far as the statistical analysis, what, if anything, did you find with reference to that?
Yes, so we did, like I mentioned, that likelihood ratio, and in the case of it being a mixture of John O'Keefe and 2 unknown unrelated individuals, it would be 740 non-alien times more likely that it was a mixture of John O'Keefe and 2 unrelated individuals versus 3 unknown unrelated individuals.
Now, that number that you
It's on
just
the
referenced,
tail light, right?
non-alien times more likely. How many zeros are in the non-alien?
Non-alien is 30 zeros.
It doesn't matter. It's John's DNA, and it's found on items John's DNA should be on. Can we just move the F on?
This is at least as relevant as
Analysis
finding John's DNA on his
supported
own
a,
clothes that he was wearing at the time of his passing.
Exactly. It's
A
so
strong support for
stupid.
inclusion.
Yeah,
correct?
and what a
Now,
watershed
can you
moment
explain to the
that
jury what
was,
that means
according
as
to
far as
all
a
the
strong support for
antes.
inclusion?
Yes, so
His
we have
DNA was on there. She
a chart
totally
that,
did.
based on the likelihood ratio, so that 749 alien number, based on the different numbers that we might get, we assign a verbal
Anything
qualifier to
Karen's
that just to make
DNA
it
wasn't.
user friendly. So in this case, it would technically be very strong support for inclusion.
Now, in your comparison analysis between the taillight sample and the known standard from Yuri Buchanan, what conclusions did you make from your analysis of those?
So he could not be visually excluded based on just comparing the profile to the StarMix output. So we do the likelihood ratio to determine that, like I said, that likelihood ratio. So in this case, it was 46 million times more likely that it was 3 unknown unrelated individuals versus Yuri Buchanan and 2 unknown unrelated individuals. So that would be very strong support for
Oh, you
exclusion.
said the name right
Yeah,
that
sir,
time.
could sound a little. When you say very strong
Close
support for
enough.
exclusion, what does that mean?
Again, we're just referring back to the verbal scale that we have as part of our reporting guidelines.
Now, in your comparison analysis between the taillight sample and the known standard from Michael Proctor, what conclusions did you make from your analysis there?
Yes, so he could not be visually excluded, again, based on that initial comparison. So we run the statistic, and it was 76,000 times more likely that it was 3 unknown unrelated individuals versus Michael Proctor and 2 unknown unrelated individuals. And that would be strong support for exclusion.
So with reference to the comparative analysis between Trooper Proctor's
So you
DNA
can't
sample
exclude
and
them.
the sample, that was a strong support for exclusion, correct?
Correct.
Now, turning your attention to what your
But
label,
he was probably wearing gloves,
labeled as
so we know
EO1.
that it doesn't matter.
We don't care about Michael Proctor and Yuri Bukaki. I want to have testing against Brian Albert, Brian Higgins. Those are the people I want to have tested if they are a part of the mix. But Again, the Commonwealth never sought their DNA. And I'm pretty sure that Brian Alberts are on file because he's a cop. It has been used to exclude him in other cases. They could just pull his case. He would never have denied them access to his DNA. I know this. He's a good cop.
Also, what is this proving other than, yes, John had interaction with Karen's car? They were in the same garage. That
They pretty
DNA,
much live together.
yeah, nothing about this proves the time at which that DNA was deposited. So,
No.
No, but again, it's. I hope the defense asked this because they didn't do it with his clothes. Asked the question: would it be uncommon to find on your spouse's car?
That has a corresponding Massachusetts State
United
Crime
brought that
Legislation
up in
number
one of the
3-6.1.
daylight things.
Marissa,
They like sustained it or something like that.
Marissa, I said that they could just ask him. They have it on record, and he could just allow them to use the prior sample. Because he's a good cop. Good cops would, of course, give access to their DNA and their phone. And he has nothing to hide, Marissa. What are you implying?
Is that correct?
Correct.
And what was the description that was provided by the external submitting agency as far as that item?
So that was the shaft end of a hair from the exterior passenger side rear panel of that same plate number.
Now, as far as that, I understand that your lab didn't do it, but you're familiar with the process as far as extracting a DNA profile from a hair, correct?
Yes.
Can you explain that process to the jury?
Yes. So during the extraction process, we dissolve the hair and then we attempt to do our normal DNA processing.
Now, what is different, if anything, in DNA testing when it comes to hair?
So hair, generally, if it's the hair shaft only, we would not expect to get great STR results. However, it is possible.
Shaft
so we usually
only,
attempt that first.
giggity.
Now, are you familiar with the term?
Well, you might not get STR results, but you could get STD results. If you're a man and there is an $80,000 car in your garage, your DNA better be all over the outside, the floor mats, and in the gas tank at the least. It's her car.
Fair
but
point.
again, if you are in new love, yeah, there should be bodily fluids more than one place. Some on the chin, some on
From
the
a
back.
follicular tissue?
Yes.
And can you please explain to the jury what that is?
What?
Yeah. So that would be the hair follicle, and in the hair follicle, we would expect to find a lot of
Thank you, Brendan.
nuclear
for
DNA. So that would be
settling
DNA
that
from
one.
the nucleus of cells.
You mentioned there any sort of piece of hair. There's a root end and a shaft end, correct?
Correct.
And can you, probably pretty well understood, but could you please explain to the jury the difference between the two?
Yeah. So the root end would be the end that we would
Please
expect to find the
explain
root
the
or
root
the
and
follicle,
shaft
and then the
in
shaft
great
end would be
detail.
just the shaft of the hair itself.
Now, what is autosomal DNA testing?
Yeah, so autosomal DNA testing. So autosomal DNA is the DNA that from mother and father that's combined in the child. So that would be opposed to DNA that's inherited directly from a single parent. So that would be something like Y chromosome DNA that would be inherited directly from the father. So all the sons of a father would have the same Y profile. Also, there's mitochondrial DNA. So the mitochondria exist outside the nucleus of the cell, and that is inherited directly from the mother. So all of a mother's children would have the same mitochondrial profile.
Now, so from your analysis, what were your conclusions for the hair, EO1 in your autosomal or SDR testing?
Yes. So we performed the extraction and then the quantification, and the quantification results were below the limit of detection. So we would not expect to get an STR profile from that hair.
And if you could expound just a bit as far as that term below the limit of detection, what exactly does that mean?
Yes. So during the quantification process, our instruments are calibrated as part of our internal validations to detect a certain amount of DNA. And once we get below that amount of DNA, it's determined. We call that undetermined. So that would be below the instrument's limit of detection. And based on those validations, we would not expect to get a profile from that.
And so what happened with the hair extraction sample in your lab at Bodie from there once you had completed the SDR testing?
Yes. So like I said, it's not unexpected that the shaft of a hair would not give us STR results. So we often transfer those to the mitochondrial group that does the mitochondrial DNA testing.
And why is that transferred from you to another analyst within the lab?
I'm not personally signed off in mitochondria. We don't do quite enough testing to have everyone signed off in all the different technologies.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Woohoo!
Mr. Jackson?
Yay,
Oh my
thank you,
God,
God.
thank you.
Oh, it's not even Alessi.
Couple of questions. You mentioned, Mr. Radford, a quantification related to both urobutynic and a known sample from
I've
former
missed
trooper Michael
him.
Proctor.
Oh,
Can we go over? I'm going to ask you about the sample related to Michael Proctor. I think I heard you say 1 in 76,000, correct?
Yes.
describe that one more time for the jurors. When you quantify that profile as it compares to the population of the Earth, for instance, what does that mean? What's the significance of 1 in 76,000?
Yes. So you need to be very careful when we're talking about statistics, because if we start to introduce different analogies to try to describe them, they start to go off the rails, and we're describing things that are not actually described in the statistic. So it makes a lot of sense to compare that to the population of the Earth, for example. However, what we're talking about here are the relative likelihoods of those two different explanations of the evidence profile. So like I said, in this case, it's 76,000 times more likely that we would observe that evidence profile if it were 3 unknown unrelated individuals, as opposed to Michael Proctor and then 2 unknown unrelated individuals.
And sometimes, Mr. Bradford, we get numbers that are just sort of mind-boggling. You said 30 zeros. What is that number again?
Nonillion.
Nonillion?
Nonillion, yes.
Y'all literally in your job, like, almost have to make up new numbers. Nonillion, none of us have ever heard of that. That's 1 followed by 30 zeros, correct?
Correct.
As opposed to 76,000, which is 76 followed by 3 zeros.
Yes.
Much smaller number by factors of a nonillion, nearly, correct?
Correct.
So when you say that there is strong support for the exclusion of Michael Proctor in that DNA sample, you're not suggesting that he's completely excluded as a potential contributor.
Well, no, what I'm suggesting is what the numbers state, so that it's 76,000 times more likely that it were 3 unknown or unrelated individuals versus Michael Proctor and 2 unknown unrelated individuals.
Understood. So you're not excluding him. You're simply saying statistically there's strong support for exclusion, but he's not excluded as a contributor. Is that right?
I am saying that there's strong support for exclusion, yes.
Understood. With regard to that taillight sample, you were asked to compare known samples to that taillight sample, the known samples being State Trooper Yuri Buchanan and former Trooper Michael Proctor, those 2 known samples, correct?
Correct.
Were you asked to compare a known sample from a person by the name of Brian Higgins?
No.
Were you asked to compare a known sample from a person by the name of Brian Albert?
No.
Were you asked to compare a known sample from a person named Kevin Albert?
No.
Were you asked to compare a known sample from a person by the name of former Chief Kenneth Berkowitz?
No.
Thanks. Oh, I have it.
Okay, thank you. There's Mr. Lally, any follow-up? All right, you are all set.
Woo!
That was easy.
Easy, get him out of here.
What was it?
Sidebar, sidebar. It's
Now,
a
who are they
long
gonna-
since-
Sidebar with Bev, she's holding court light. Got a claw in her hair, rolls a little too tight. Forgets the names but remembers the team. Sustains, she shouts, just randomly. She's the queen of the bench, but don't ask her why.
Ugh.
That was a long sidebar.
Oh my gosh, they're letting Lolly back up again. So I'm guessing
can't be
this is going to
important.
be
Yeah. it's not important.
the second meteorologist to remind us it was snowing, or a cat veterinarian to explain what tracking a cat snow looks like.
Could be.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give to the court and the jury in the matter now pending shall be the truth?
It's Ricada's brother with that snouse.
I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury, spelling your last name for the court?
Carl Miyasako, M-I-Y-A-S-A.
Oh, he's another
K-O.
DNA
And
analyst.
what do you do for work, sir?
I'm a senior DNA analyst at a forensic laboratory called Bodie Technology,
And where is Bodie Technologies located?
Lorton, Virginia.
And where did you go to school?
Virginia Commonwealth University.
And what degrees did you receive there?
I have a bachelor's of science in forensic science.
Now, following your education, where did you go to work?
Bodie Technology.
And how long have you worked there?
I've been employed at that laboratory for over 11 years.
And when you joined Bodie Technologies, what was your position and title that you were initially hired for?
Initially, I started off as a DNA technician.
And when did you become an analyst?
After a few years at the laboratory, I became a DNA analyst.
What is the difference at Bodie Lab between a technician and an analyst?
Technician mainly does laboratory work, and an analyst is allowed to analyze data and write reports.
Now, could you please describe for the jury the training that you underwent initially as a technician?
So I observed people perform all the tasks that I was training in, and then I'm supervised performing tasks by a qualified individual, and then I do competency tests where I'm performing things independently.
Now, is there a continuing educational component of Bodhi?
Yes.
And could you please describe for the jury what that entails?
So
I feel
continuing
like I'm
education
in
just,
Groundhog Day. Yeah.
allows
This-
analysts or technicians to keep up to date with current topics within the
We just
community
had all
and
of this with the
future,
previous witness. Move
advancements in
on.
technologies.
Yeah.
Now, could you please describe for the jury what type of lab Bodhi is?
Bodhi is a
God.
private accredited forensic laboratory.
And where do your cases come from?
Our cases come from different agencies throughout the country, so law enforcement agencies, medical examiners, other laboratories as well.
Thank you, Stacy Labruno.
And is that purely on a statewide basis, national basis, or something else?
National basis.
And what is the difference at Bodhi Lab or Bodhi Technologies between a DNA analyst 1 and a DNA analyst 2?
The type of caseload and different cases being assigned to these individuals.
Now, what is your current role at Bodhi Labs?
My current role is a senior DNA analyst.
And what is a senior DNA analyst, and what do you do in that role?
So senior analyst provides expertise or leadership in at least one discipline within the company. Senior analysts report challenging cases, are independent of other analysts, and also train other.
Sorry, I'm just jumping back because apparently we missed something. That wasn't Karen leaving the courtroom. That was Miss Little.
Yeah.
No, that
So-
was the other one, I think, because Miss Little has a ponytail.
Oh, yeah. So it wasn't Karen that ran out and
Other analysts as well.
and Peggy shaking her head.
Keep your voice up.
It's with receipt of evidence, and then it goes through the laboratory through different procedures up until we develop that DNA profile, and it gets interpreted and analyzed.
Now, is the Bodhi Lab accredited?
Yes.
And by whom is it accredited?
We are accredited by ANSI National Accreditation Board.
Now, are there steps taken within your lab at Bodhi to prevent against contamination?
Yeah, we have protocol.
I do miss having a beagle in my life. If I can find the money to buy the house, I will start grifting like Twisted Tragedies, by the way, so I can buy a house. I would love to have a beagle again. There's a big garden to the house I'm looking at.
Yeah, donate to the
Calls
Baker's House.
to monitor contamination and to also prevent contamination.
Now, also at the lab, is there a review process, and can you sort of describe your role as it applies as a senior DNA analyst to that review process?
Yeah, so all cases go through a review.
The actual purpose of this is just to prove that they looked at some DNA. This is, again, we're going to show you a ton of evidence that has nothing to do with John O'Keefe dying. But hopefully you will forget that and just say, well, we spent 5 weeks listening to the state side. So they must have shown us something we just didn't get.
Review process. So after, let's say,
They
the
do that.
reporting analyst completes a case, it goes into submission for a technical review.
I used to have a beagle.
During that review process,
She
the
was
entire
awesome.
case file is looked over. So it's looked over to see if everything was done per protocol, if it's something that I or anyone else in the lab would have done, if any necessary processing steps were taken. Data is reviewed. If there was comparisons, that's something that
Oh, Bev is looking case
a
law.
reviewing analyst would also do and see if they come to the same conclusions as the
Oh, that's done
other
quickly.
analysts.
Now, just again, in general terms,
Hey,
can you
there-
explain to the jury just a
Hello?
little bit more in detail as far as the protocols that a technical review is concerned with, and sort of how a technical review is able to establish that the testing was done in comportment with that?
Yeah, so as me, if I were doing a technical review, I would look over the entire case file. Did what the processing steps happen? Were they per protocol? Is it also something that I would have done in this case? If data is ultimately generated, I also do that comparison. Based on that comparison, what did I come to the conclusion to? Was that the same as the other analysts? Did we agree Were stats done? Were they done the same way I would have done it? Essentially, all conclusions would have to be in alignment between both analysts.
And so when you're doing a technical review, you're looking at or doing your own sort of comparisons, coming to your own conclusions and running your own statistics. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm doing the comparisons myself and seeing if I also agree and come to the same conclusions.
Now, as part of the accreditation
just want to give
process,
them a
do you
hug.
undergo any sort of
And I'm
proficiency
kind of against
testing?
hugging people.
We do.
I don't
And
know.
can you explain to the jury that proficiency testing process at Bodie Technologies?
So an outside organization sends tests to our
He's just
laboratory.
Hugging himself and
He's
Connie
like the
Marie-
Asian Ben Stein.
Connie Marie, this guy wonders how he acted on a date too, because so far, all his talk about, I did a proficiency test. Do you want me to take you home and do a DNA test on you? Hasn't worked, but someday he will pick up a girl on that. It's kind of like me when I say, did it hurt when
Girl,
you fall
Baker.
from heaven because you're an angel?
I don't
look,
think he's
his
picking up a
mom
girl.
picked out his
Baker.
suit really well.
He kind of looks like that guy who got to second base with that OnlyFans model. The guy who slept
He
in
kind
Randy.
of does. The attic dweller. He kind of does. Oh, that
Everyone
case-
participating in these proficiency testing completes their assignment. It gets submitted back to the organization, and they review the results to see if it matches up with the expected results on their end.
And how often do analysts at your lab undergo proficiency testing?
Twice a year.
Now, turning to you specifically, what areas do you specifically undergo proficiency testing in?
I do testing within short chain and repeats, STRs, YSTRs, mitochondrial DNA analysis.
And have you successfully completed each of those proficiency tests that you've taken?
I have.
Now, could you explain to the jury what are positive and negative controls, and sort of what is the difference between the two of those?
So throughout
No, we
processing,
already
we introduce
talked
controls
about
such as a
positive
positive
and
and negative control.
controls.
A positive control is just a known template that we introduce during processing. It measures the efficacy of the testing and to see if we develop the known profile that we are expecting, just to make sure that testing went as it should have. Negative control, on the other hand, monitors for any type of contamination and cleanliness of reagents. And there's no DNA template introduced in this, so we don't expect data. So once that aligns with it, then we know that reagents used were good.
Now, sir, are you familiar with some mitochondrial DNA testing that was performed at Bodie on lab case number CCA 2416-0023 pertaining to this defendant, Karen Reed?
Yes,
And the lab received those items for testing from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory, correct?
correct.
And did you also, or do you also receive a corresponding agency case number from that or any submitting agency?
Yes,
And in this case was the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory, lab number 22-02184.
yes.
And what type of work did Bodie Labs do on CCA 2416-0023 with respect to mitochondrial DNA testing?
So we received 2 evidence items, a hair sample and a reference sample, and we were asked to type these for mitochondrial DNA.
Now, could you explain to the jury the process in general terms used to analyze that type of evidence?
So it's a similar process that you may have heard already for nuclear DNA or STRs. So after DNA extraction, that's where we isolate and release DNA from the sample. It goes through amplification processing. This is where we employ the polymerase chain reaction or
Well, Kim, it would be important in this case it wasn't John's DNA found on items that he should be around all the time, leaving his DNA on. But again, it's just evidence to make you think they showed you something. It's not evidence of anything. It's just, hey, look, we did the hand waving. Oh, the hand waving must be important.
PCR technique. So we create
The next guy's going to tell us that they found DNA on his
This is just so we have enough
steering
DNA to generate a DNA profile.
Or in the passenger
she was driving.
Quantification. So we
It's going to be a mixture of their
generate an
DNA.
estimate of how much DNA is present within the sample. Following that, we do what's called sequencing. So we use a technique called finger sequencing. So bases within the sample, the order bases are determined, and bases are essentially building blocks of the DNA. So everyone has 4 bases in their DNA, and we refer to these bases to the letters A, G, T, and C. After sequencing, we go through what's called capillary electrophoresis, and so these bases are sequenced individually, and the data is interpreted.
Now, was there a known standard done in this case?
Yes.
And did another analyst test and report the results from the known blood standard from Mr. John O'Keefe?
What was that? Sorry.
Sure. Did another analyst test and report the results from the known blood standard from a Mr. John O'Keefe?
Yes.
And again, with reference to mitochondrial DNA testing, what items did the Bodie lab test for?
A hair shaft sample and the known DNA standard.
Now, can you please describe to the jury, again, in general terms, the process of comparison between a known standard and an evidence sample?
So we generate data from typically the evidence sample first, and then just to see that we get comparable data, and then we process the known reference standard. Then we look at the two.
Pretty sure this guy really likes male toilet DNA. Lefty, when you're right, you're right.
DNA profiles of these different samples and compare them. Based on the data, are we seeing that we can or cannot exclude the reference donor as being a source of the evidence sample?
What is autosomal DNA?
Autosomal DNA is like nuclear DNA. It's something that you maybe more, when thought of forensics, traditional STR short-handed repeats.
I know that it's kind of you have to do it, but again, you just did it with another witness from the exact same institute, and you added this guy because someone had a medical emergency, and it's not important.
And what is mitochondrial DNA?
Mitochondrial DNA is a
correction. I feel like I'm in the movie Misery. Yeah, someone will come take out your knees in a moment, because at least then you'll feel something.
different type of DNA from nuclear DNA. Nuclear DNA, you get half of your DNA from your parents, so mom and dad, whereas mitochondrial DNA, it gets entirely inherited from mother to child.
What is the difference between the two as far as where it's located in reference to the nucleus of the cell?
So with STRs, there's basically 2 copies per
call
cell,
party
whereas with
foul.
mitochondrial
He
DNA,
didn't
there's
bring
several
a homemade
copies
model of
per cell, so there's
the
more abundance in
cell.
mitochondrial DNA.
Now, how does that apply to an extract from a hair sample?
I was really hoping for a
So for
shadow
hair
box.
samples, we typically
I
categorize
was
these
really
with like
hoping
hairs with
for
roots and rootless hair samples.
extract from the Magic
so with
School Bus.
hair samples typically on the shaft end, there's more abundance of mitochondrial DNA versus nuclear DNA, where nuclear DNA.
No, the strategy is to give you so much confusing evidence that when you are sitting in the back discussing this, you will say, but the defense only went for a week. Yeah, and the other guys went for 5 weeks. And we had this DNA guy, we had this crime tech guy, we had this. What did they say? Hell if I know. I don't understand half the words they're saying, and I have to admit I was sleeping, but it must have been important. It's the classic maneuver you use when you don't have a case. You'll just flood the other side with evidence.
The Chewbacca prosecution? That's weird.
Yeah. Who had a medical emergency? I missed it. No one had a medical emergency, but it looked like, I think it's McLaughlin ran out of the courtroom. So
McLaughlin?
I don't know if it was a medical emergency.
DNA tends to be degraded or not present in high enough amounts.
What does PCR stand for?
PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction.
And can you please describe the PCR method to the jury?
Yeah, so that's the process where we create specific targeted sections of the DNA over and over. So we're replicating DNA using the source material as a template. This is because we want enough copies of that DNA to generate the end result of the DNA profile. So it'd be similar to, say, like a copy machine. You start with a single piece of paper, and you make many, many copies from that piece of paper.
Now, so you alluded to it, I believe, earlier in the testimony, but just specifically as to this topic, what is DNA sequencing?
DNA sequencing is where we determine the order of bases within that sample.
And how is DNA sequencing used specifically in mitochondrial DNA testing?
So we use that to generate the sequence specific to that sample, so
That's
that
it. Where
when we
are
get
my
the end result
Bev
data, we compare it to a
glasses?
known standard or a common reference standard, and any differences from that common standard gets reported as that individual's mitochondrial profile.
Now, how is the testing different between autosomal versus mitochondrial DNA testing?
A lot of it does have some similarities, but the difference comes with STRs being more of a length fragment testing, and mitochondrial DNA is more of a base nucleotide DNA.
Oh, it was Karen Reed who ran out, and I think Miss Little followed her. And then Peck was shaking her head. I just missed it. Sorry. I'll show you what it was. So probably something wrong with Karen's stomach, and that's why. Because she ran off, and Peggy looks at her like she's gonna go after her and stuff her head in the toilet. Shaking her head. What a cow.
She really
So
is.
that's the pretend or the possible medical emergency.
Testing.
Is this a Canton, Massachusetts thing? When you want to look like you're not a thunder cow, you wear sky blue? Because you noticed Karen wore it once, and then Jen wore it the very next day. and now Peg is wearing it.
Yeah.
There was the whole blue for
Oh,
prosecution, pink for defense thing in the beginning. I don't know how much of that still carries over.
Fair
exists.
point.
Well,
I forgot about that.
The food stamp 5 hasn't been out there in their blue shirts that cost $25 for a $10 t-shirt.
DNA, how is that sort of physically done, or what kind of tools are you using specific to mitochondrial DNA testing?
Yeah, so we use different instrumentation, such as like a thermocycler to do like the PCR step. And then we also use what's called like a genetic analyzer at the end step of capillary electrophoresis.
Is there a certain type of gel that's used as far as visualization of that profile?
Yeah, so during the quantification step, we use what's called a EO-gel, and we get a visual presentation of how much DNA is present within that sample.
When you say a visual presentation, like what type of instruments are you using to get that visualization?
So we use a gel and a UV light and a camera to capture essentially what we refer to as a band.
And what does that band look like?
It's generally, if there is presence of mitochondrial DNA within that sample, it emits a bright band on this gel. If there is anything, then we don't observe that band.
And what kind of instrumentation does your lab utilize in mitochondria?
On Sunday, we do arms, because if you want to go to the nursing home and back some granny cooter, beat her in checkers, then take off her scooter. Your arms better be effing swole. Thank you, Brennan, for lightening the mood while we're watching this boring part of the trial.
DNA testing.
We use a thermocycler or 3130 genetic analyzer as well.
Could you spell that?
I haven't seen new videos from
the thermocycler, or THERMAL CYCLER. And then the genetic analyzer is a 3130 3130.
And if you could you please describe what those instruments do or what they're used for specifically within the process of mitochondrial DNA testing?
Yeah, so instruments is common within laboratories for automation purposes. So that thermocycler helps with the PCR stages, and then the genetic analyzer helps with the separation of the individual bases and then generating that end result data where the analyst will interpret the.
Well, Peg is a horrible, as Mo would call it, thunder cow, and as Stephanie, the alternate, would call a cowbag, because she's the way she's. If people liked her after seeing her on the stand, something's wrong with you. The way she was talking about her husband through, what was it, 50 years of marriage?
Too long. Been married too long.
Yeah. Once it's a joke, the second time was just mean. So her putting down everyone. Her and John wasn't even talking at the time. But all of a sudden, oh, I am a grieving mother.
Data.
Now, what is a T-loop?
It is definitely not an easy thing to deal with.
And how does that D-loop factor into this type of analysis?
So with mitochondrial DNA analysis, we analyze certain regions within the D-loop or the control region, and we refer to these as hypervariable regions, so HV1 and HV2.
And what does the D-loop have to do with certain variabilities within the human population?
So this region is a non-coding region within the mitochondria, so it can allow for mutations because it wouldn't affect the mitochondrial functions. Because of this highly variable difference within this region, it's useful for determining different maternal
Massachusetts, you had a slow pitch from God of hilarity here, and yet you blew it.
Is that mitochondrial DNA testing the same for the known standard of John O'Keefe as it is, as you've been describing with reference to the evidence sample?
Yes.
And what is then done generally in the comparison of those two profiles?
So once we develop the profiles from these two separate sources, a comparison is done to each other, and we look at it to see if the profiles consistent, essentially matching with each other, and seeing if an exclusion or inclusion can be made.
And did you then perform your own comparative analysis of those two mitochondrial DNA profiles from the hair extracts from the rear panel of the defendant's vehicle and that of the known standard of Mr. O'Keefe?
I did.
And what is your opinion or conclusions that you arrived at from that comparative analysis?
Sustained.
Hold
on. Ask it differently.
What conclusions did you come to from that comparative analysis between those two standards?
That John O'Keefe could not be excluded as being a source of the hair sample.
Now, can you expound a little as far as your conclusion is concerned? What does that mean?
What did you do?
Yeah, if I may refer to my report.
Yes.
So whenever we have a conclusion of a probable inclusion, like in this case where I could not exclude John O'Keefe as being a source of the hair sample, we do a statistical analysis to give weight to that.
What?
What?
Now, can you expound a little as far as your conclusion is concerned? What does that mean?
Yeah, if I may refer to my report.
Yes.
Wait, we didn't even get to jump forward in time?
So whenever we have a conclusion of a probable inclusion, like in this case where I could not exclude John O'Keefe as being a source of the hair sample, we do a statistical analysis to give weight to that.
What?
The population.
Court TV
probable inclusion. So in this case, using a database and with 95% confidence, at least 99.895% of the population can be excluded as being a source of that hair sample.
Let me ask you just in general terms, that database you're using is referred to as MPOP, EMPOP, is that correct?
Correct.
And what is an MPOP?
So it's a searchable database where we search minor profiles in the database and essentially to see how common or rare that profile will be seen in the population. With MPOP in our laboratory, we search 3 main population groups within the United States: African American, Caucasian, Hispanic. And so the general goal is just to see how rare would that profile be within these populations.
And so what conclusions did you come to with reference to the consistency of hair sample versus Mr. O'Keefe's sample?
That's what I was thinking.
With 95% confidence, at least 99.895% of the population can be excluded as being a source of the hair sample.
You made reference in your testimony.
No, he has shared that they made a DNA profile that matched John O'Keefe's DNA profile.
A moment before about a confidence interval. What is that?
Yeah, so whenever we obtain statistical data, we use a confidence interval or upper limit frequency. This is just like a range where the true value of said profile is, but we generally want to report like conservative end to avoid any false inclusions. So it's at least 99.895% that the majority.
Kim, I agree. I feel sorry for her loss, but I don't feel sorry for her as a person, the way she has acted after her loss. She has turned it into her martyrdom. Sorry,
Yeah.
it's martyr in Danish.
You had it,
but she's turned into this angry, vicious woman, and anyone who have looked at this with objective eyes can't see that crime that she's fighting so hard to get Karen convicted of. So in my eyes, I don't feel sorry for her. I feel sorry for her loss because no one should go through that. But yeah.
The population can be excluded, but it could be higher, but at the lower end, it would be at least 99.895%.
And what confidence interval in your conclusion does this consistency between the hair sample profile from the rear quarter panel of the defendant's vehicle have to Mr. O'Keefe's mitochondrial DNA profile?
So it's the 95% confidence, 99.985% of the population. So the majority of the population could be excluded. However, with John O'Keefe and his maternal relatives, they could not.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing further on.
And that's the part the defense needs to underline.
Yeah.
John O'Keefe and his maternal relatives. So Peg, the niece, the nephew, John,
the brother.
Good morning, Mr. Misaka.
Good morning.
Couple of quick questions. Mitochondrial DNA, as you've explained, is different than autosomal DNA in pretty significant ways, correct?
Correct.
What we think of as traditional nuclear DNA, that's autosomal DNA. That's the DNA that we derive from mom and dad comes down to the child, correct?
Correct.
Mitochondrial DNA, by contrast, is simply the maternal line, excluding the dads, correct?
Correct.
So my mitochondrial DNA has nothing to do with my father, everything to do with my mother. Is that right?
Yeah, mitochondrial DNA gets inherited from the mom to child.
Okay, so a male like John O'Keefe, for instance, the known sample that you were working with, shares the exact same mitochondrial DNA as, for instance, his mother, right?
Correct. His mom and any other maternally related individuals.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. That's my next question. Stop being smarter than me. It's going to be a tough task. It's also the exact same mitochondrial DNA for his grandmother, right?
Correct.
And let's move the lineage off the tree trunk and move it onto branches. For instance, if his mother had
You just called Peg a trunk.
John and a sister, his sister would also have the exact same mitochondrial DNA, correct?
Correct.
And now staying on that branch of the tree, going out to a leaf, if his sister had children, those children would have the exact same mitochondrial DNA.
At least 3 people in that
So another
house.
way of saying that his maternal niece, his maternal nephew would have the identical mitochondrial DNA as John O'Keefe, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When you indicated that John O'Keefe is included in the population of those who match that profile, that does not mean that you're determining that the hair that you analyzed came from John O'Keefe, does it?
No, with mitochondrial DNA analysis, it's not unique to individual. Compared to traditional STRs or short-chain repeat, that could be unique to individual. But with mitochondrial DNA, it's not unique to individual, but more so a maternal
That is a great
lineage.
point, AJ.
All right. So, Mr. Miyasaka,
Agreed, Kim.
very importantly, you're not sitting here saying that that hair belonged to John O'Keefe.
I'm saying that the hair sample in John O'Keefe cannot be excluded, as well as his maternal
So we're
relatives.
speaking in negatives. I want to speak in a positive. You are not saying that John O'Keefe, that hair belonged to John O'Keefe, are you? Yes or
Why
no?
would you?
Sustain.
Are you
Portugal
suggesting
is
to
not
the
known
jurors
for
that
this.
the hair
No.
that you analyzed belonged to John O'Keefe?
Sustain.
Are you telling the jurors to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that the hair that you analyzed belonged to John O'Keefe?
I'll see you type back.
Sure.
There's three
Are
other
you telling
people
the
in the
jurors
household that would match that DNA
To a
profile.
reasonable degree of scientific certainty that the hair that you
Two other,
analyzed
three total.
belonged to John O'Keefe?
I'll see you type back.
Sure.
You should have watched the first trial with us because we talked about it already back then. We are smart cookies.
I don't
Why?
know about that.
Why
but we
can't?
say
Really?
Why
smart
is
things.
Deb such a
And why is that
thunder
an
cow?
objection?
I don't know why there's an objection. They should be allowed to ask that question because it's a straightforward question. He
It
cannot
is a
with
straightforward
any
question.
he can with no medical certainty say this hair belongs to John O'Keefe. And
No.
and Lally don't want it in there, and there's no reason to deny it, but we know why.
It's
Bev is
devastating
most
to his
likely going to
case.
deny it.
Exactly. You need that clip from Liar Liar to put in every
We do.
Yeah.
time. Objection, Your Honor. Grounds. It's devastating to my case.
There's so many good clips from Liar Liar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not breaking the law, asshole.
You know what I do like is that none of the professional, not affiliated with trooper witnesses don't look at Brennan or Lally like, help me. Like, objection. Because some
wish
of
there
them
was a
were not
wider-
subtle.
I wish there was a wider angle.
I don't
Because
think
a lot
any
of
of
those-
these.
Go ahead.
I don't think any of the experts have that deal that I'm casting you the side eye, but it's clear that the police and the civilian witnesses have that. I'm looking at you like a deer in the headlights.
I'd like to see if they stand up to object
May I
before
inquire?
witnesses
Thank you.
look that
Mr.
way, or
Miyasako,
if
going
they
back
look
to my
that way
question.
first, and then
You're
there's-
not saying that the hair belonged to John O'Keefe, correct? That's not what you're saying.
What I'm saying is based on the genetic data obtained from the hair sample and the genetic data obtained from the known reference sample of John O'Keefe, I could not exclude John O'Keefe as being a possible source of the hair sample. In addition, all maternally related individuals could not be excluded as being
Then
a
you
source
have
of
to
the
pull it out
hair
of that.
sample.
Could it have been
Another
Paul?
way of saying that, Mr. Miyasako, is to a reasonable degree of scientific
It is
certainty.
as likely.
You cannot say that hair belonged to John O'Keefe specifically. can
He's
you?
not going to come off
Yes or
of
no?
this.
No, with mitochondrial DNA, you can't
Okay.
say
you.
that it is per se
Oh,
an
I
individual
was wrong.
person. So it's more so the maternal line.
Because the hair could have come from his mom, it could have come from his maternal nephew, or anybody in his maternal line, correct?
Correct. If
Okay.
they also had access to that stuff, then yeah,
For instance, access to that stuff, meaning if his maternal nephew lived in the home with him, where the SUV was stored,
Why? I don't like
just
this
as
at
reasonable
all.
if the
Why?
hair came from him.
No, don't put the
Correct.
nephew's name on it.
Well, not that.
No,
just
but-
with Peggy. Like, why are you
No,
zooming in on
but-
Peggy right now?
Your analysis
that's
does not
also-
tell us when
Hair
the
can get
hair
everywhere too.
got to where it was found, correct?
correct.
Your analysis does not tell us how the hair got to where it was found, correct?
Correct.
And mitochondrial DNA does not reveal anything about the hair's color or age or texture, nothing like that.
Not on the analysis that we performed.
Okay. So for all you know, that hair could have been placed where it was found by somebody else.
Sustain.
Yeah, I don't
You're
think this
not
is the
telling this jury how the hair got where it was ultimately found and recovered, correct?
Correct. Our testing is just based on the evidence provided to us and the comparisons done between the two different evidence.
And in short, you can't say that the hair specifically came from John O'Keefe either, can you?
With mitochondrial DNA, I can't say that it is specific to an individual.
Okay, including John O'Keefe.
In this instance, John O'Keefe's profile was consistent with the hair sample.
That's not what my question was, Mr. Miyasako.
Oh my God, guy.
Go round and round. I realize that you're saying it's consistent, but it's also consistent with his nephew, right?
Correct.
His
I can't
brother.
exclude maternal relatives because mitochondrial DNA is not specific
Use
to
his
individual,
brother
but
instead.
just the maternal line.
Well, the kid lives in the house. It makes perfect sense. that
I
hair could be
can't
his
say whether
nephew.
it is, but the profile obtained from John O'Keefe is consistent with that hair sample.
You're not
But
saying it's John
Mr. Jackson.
Why is he?
You stop, Bev. You zip it.
What he's saying on Monday we do chest, because if you want to give a thick granny the shocker while she's sitting in her rocker, your arms better be swole. Your arms won't be swole if you're doing chest, Brandon. Then you're doing it wrong. But thank you.
Bev,
Sorry.
I won't allow it, Mr. Jackson.
No, she
Move
needs
along.
to quit intervening. This is not her job.
Yeah.
Or it, in fact, is
you,
her only
Jamie?
job that she's doing on this trial.
Where have you been the last 2 years? This is how Bev gets down.
Yeah.
This
Jackson.
is her, you know,
This
SOP
is worse
operating
than last
procedure.
time. This is worse than last time. You know it.
She
It's
does need a
bad.
PIP. She needs a
The reason you
performance
can't say that
improvement
it's John
plan.
O'Keefe's hair is because it also matches everybody in his maternal line. That's what we're getting down to, correct?
yeah, with mitochondrial DNA, again, it's not unique to an individual, but their maternal lineage.
And if his maternal nephew lived in the same residence and had access to the same SUV, couldn't exclude him either, right?
Again, don't do the nephew. Do the brother.
So in
do
sum,
the
in short,
someone.
Mr. Miyasako, you can't say.
But the nephew
cannot
lives
tell
in the house. It
jury-
makes perfect sense to me.
It does.
Yeah, but the nephew is a 9-year-old boy that lost his mother. You don't bring a 9-year-old boy who lost his mother into it because you will get pity points.
It's not blame that he's assigning.
No, it's not
No,
blaming
he's
him.
not
It's just like
saying
it
the
could have
kid
been
did
there.
it. Right.
Again,
just-
It's a
every time he
possibility.
mentions the nephew, he could have used Paul O'Keefe instead, or he could have used Peck
No, the
instead.
boy lived
Two
there.
people that are sitting right across from the jury and say these two people could it have been from either one of them because they are
One quick
mentioning
point.
nephew.
Why would
One
that
quick
make sense?
point.
Because
Maybe don't use the bald guy for the example of hair.
no, but
You
also
can't
why are
even
you
tell if
using
it's a head
people
hair.
that don't live in the house? That's
Well,
the thing.
Because it
And why
could
do we
be
need to expand
it's a
on all these
hypothetical.
hypotheticals?
Yeah,
It's
that's
a
what I'm saying.
hypothetical, so why would you use the nephew who is a 9-year-old boy? It's just
Because
the
he lived there.
objects of it.
Baker,
He would have,
Bigger
But it doesn't make
questions.
sense.
it does.
why
make-
are you
I-
using a hypothetical on a man who is clearly, let's just say, has a bit of the tism? He is not going to want to go into hypotheticals. Lab people don't want to go into hypotheticals unless he would have been better crossing him. He would have gotten across the point that it's the entire matrilineal line, and he wouldn't have brought in hypotheticals. This is not the witness that is going to follow you on any of these hypotheticals, at least in my
The
opinion.
kid-
Yeah.
The kid lives there. The kid has daily access.
But then-
it's
then
just
say
as
if a-
likely that it's that kid's hair that it is John's hair. So
But then
see no
he
problem with
keeps mentioning the nephew.
Mhm.
He could say a kid who is related to John O'Keefe maternally. He doesn't have to say the nephew. To me, it just comes off as, why are we talking about this nephew that we haven't seen? We just had the niece on the stand, and she could be very damning. We don't know, but I just don't like it when you bring kids into it. That's just my take. I think it'll backfire. I would say, so hypothetically, if Paul O'Keefe had been in that garage, it could have been his hair. I think that's a better hypothetical because I don't like talking about kids.
Yeah,
And the
it
hair got
also
to
just
where it
seems
was,
like poor
correct?
strategy for the defense. You have a lessee who's a
You
science
can't tell
guy.
this jury how the hair got to where it was found, correct?
Sustained.
And you certainly cannot tell the jury that the hair belonged to John, right?
Sustained.
I think we've got it. Thanks, Your Honor.
Mr. Lally, anything?
Thanks for nothing, Bev.
Right. That last question should have
Who
been.
cares if it's John O'Keefe's hair? They care because it could be anyone's hair. That's the thing. Anyone who's
Mr.
related to
Miyasako,
Peck.
including the MPOP, the statistics, and the confidence interval, what is your conclusion in reference to the comparative analysis from mitochondrial profiles from the hair sample from the rear quarter panel of the defendant's vehicle and the known standard of John O'Keefe?
Based on the genetic data obtained for the two different samples, I could not exclude John O'Keefe's known standards profile being consistent with the hair samples profile, and with 95% confidence, at least 99.895% of the population can be excluded as a source of the evidence.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
One final question.
Yeah,
I would just ask.
95% confidence in the
Yeah,
I would ask
sorry,
right
I'll
here.
put the boost on and maybe
We could hear. I would simply ask right here, does that exact same statistic stand true for Peggy O'Keefe, for the nephew, for the niece, for Paul O'Keefe?
Yeah,
that's all I would do right there.
Yeah.
Good idea.
And then let it be.
Evidence.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
let's hear what he
One
says.
final question. Do you also maintain that 95% confidence in the defendant's nephew?
Yeah, so again, with maternal
You can
populations.
finish your answer. Go.
With maternal populations, I can't exclude anybody maternally related to John O'Keefe as well.
That's a good way to end it.
Thank you
Don't
very much, sir.
do anything.
All set.
Thank you, Rayoflight, for becoming a YouTube member. You now have access to nothing special because I'm a bad grifter. Maybe the Super.
Como's next witness is Shannon Burgess.
Oh God.
Shannon, mister, I changed my occupation 3 times. I changed when I got my degree at least 3 times. Marissa found him on LinkedIn. He has a different time when he got his degree than he has stated in court cases.
Ooh. This is the guy from
Aperture.
That's the one.
He's the
the one
guy
they
who
were
changed his
arguing about.
timeline.
Yeah, this is the one they were arguing about on Friday.
So
This
they
guy
can do a
should get eaten alive.
yeah.
Oh, we'll see, Bev. She sit over there and keep her lips shut.
Yeah.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give to the court and the jury and the matter no opinion shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
What in the
This is
spray
the
on
guy
hair
who
color is
disputes
going on
arguments.
here?
Right, Mr. Brennan, whenever
How do
you're
you
ready.
look like you have a fresh fade and a toupee at the same time? Like, how is that
I
possible?
know. That was some. You missed the top, sir.
Oh, with the soul patch? Oh no. Oh no.
And can you promise me that you are good enough friends that when it's this horrible, you'll tell me,
I will
just let
tell
it go,
you, bro.
brother.
I will tell you. Either get a hat or shave it off.
Again, just trim it down. Just go down. It's even more visible when you do it like this. And a soul patch with a little gray in it. Oh,
like
I don't know. I don't know you, but I despise you.
He's got a weaker chin than me. Not built for soul patches, bro. Not built for soul patches.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jurors, spell your last name for the court?
Yes, we have seen this changing CV, and that our wonderful mod Marissa has also gone to LinkedIn, where he states a 4th time he got his degree, except that's different from the ones that people have shared online. So it's going to be fun to hear what Alessi could do to this guy.
Rainn Wilson has
Yeah,
go
absolutely.
after
So my
the
name is Shannon Burgess. Last name Burgess.
Mr. Burgess, what do you do for a profession?
Yes, Southern one of
So
my
I'm a
people.
digital forensics examiner. So I investigate digital devices to see what evidence they may record or hold.
Do you
I
specialize
feel like somebody
in any
should
type
investigate
of
his
forensic
digital devices.
analysis?
Sure. So digital forensics is kind of a broad field, but I do specialize in vehicle forensics and cell phone forensics.
How long have you been a digital forensic analyst for?
This
Sure.
accent.
So I've been
I
a
just
digital
don't
forensic
trust
analyst
nothing
for
coming from
approximately
his
10 years.
mouth.
Before you
from
were a
Texas.
digital forensic analyst,
If you're not frollically challenged, keep your opinions to yourself. Well, thank you, Baldy. Letty.
what type of work did you do?
Sure. So before I was a digital forensics analyst, I was working in the automotive manufacturing field, specifically related to automotive presses and industrial robotics.
I want to talk to you about some of your experience in
Wait,
digital
wait,
forensics.
hold the phone. Pause it.
Did you receive any?
I too pump my own gas, therefore I am an expertologist in the car refueling industry. I have 40 years of experience. What in the he's with presses and hydraulics. Where in the world does this have anything to do with schematics and electronical magic? Also, he was in the factory. Look, we don't have to church it up per Joe Dirt, okay, son?
Well, it's that's his prior. Then he got his new education.
Baker,
Can't
don't you
wait
have
for
those
Alyssa.
glasses?
Yeah.
I no, mine are around. I used to have glasses like that. Mine were blue.
Certifications in digital forensics.
I did. I've received several certifications. One.
Why does he have the Jack, not Jack Russell? What's his name?
Murphy.
Yeah, the Jack Murphy goatee. That's weird.
Being what's called GIAC, Advanced Smartphone Forensics. Another from Celebrite, a company named Celebrite, in Certified Mobile Examiner, and then certifications from Magnet Forensics as well.
Is Magnet a company that also includes Axiom?
Yes, Magnet is a company that produces the software known as Axiom.
In addition to your certifications, how many hours of specialized training approximately have you had in digital forensics?
Sure. So approximately, over the last 10 years, I've had around 700 hours of training, including courses and conference attendance.
Did you say over
in
10
digital
years?
forensics?
In
Yes,
addition to
10
your
years, 700
training
hours,
and
70 hours
your
a
study,
year.
you have experience over the 10
math.
years. Have you involved yourself in many cases regarding forensics found from a
Being a court expert doesn't require anything other than someone willing to put you up there, maybe do a voir dire. And if you want to see the best depiction of it, you can go watch My Cousin Winnie, where she's based as an expert because she knows that there wasn't an overdrive on a camshaft in a Camry or something. I never watched the movie.
It was
Positrack.
Positraction on the Cadillac something or other.
Well,
Buick Skylock.
but
Yeah,
still,
Skylock.
but you can
Buick Skylock didn't have Positrack rear end in that year.
but you can have an expert like me. I'm an expert in baking, because that's what I've done. I never did any bachelor's degrees. You just have to be qualified as an expert. And Mo could be a reproductionist expert
I
based
have
on
a
her
better soul
experience.
patch than he does.
motor vehicle?
Yes, I have.
Can you give a general estimate of how many cases you've worked on?
Oh, not off the top of my head, I couldn't. But it's been numerous.
What the crap?
You said that you specialize in mobile phones and
A bunch of
digital
cases,
forensics
trust
in
me,
motor
bro.
vehicles.
That is correct.
Do you teach seminars on those issues?
I do. I teach seminars and presentations specifically in those disciplines.
Who are some of the audiences that you teach to?
Sure. So it ranges from attorneys to engineers that specialize in accident reconstruction, to police agencies such as Interpol, which is a global police organization.
Have you testified as an expert in digital forensics
Baker,
in
you
court
learned something
before?
new today.
Yes,
you
I
learned
have.
about
Have you ever
Interpol.
testified as an expert regarding digital forensics in state courts?
Yes, I have.
And could you share with us those state courts?
Sure. So those state courts would be Oregon, Texas, Arkansas, New Mexico, and those would be the ones in the last 4 years that I can recall off the top of my head.
Have you testified as an expert in digital forensics in federal courts before?
No, just in state courts.
Have you testified in state courts in civil cases?
Yes, I have.
Have you testified for plaintiffs in civil cases?
I have testified for plaintiffs and defense in civil cases.
And have you testified in criminal cases before?
I got the certificate that says so. Bugs Bunny. Thank you, Lynn.
I've testified in criminal cases as well.
Have you testified for the prosecution before?
I have. I have testified for the prosecution as well as the defense.
Does the data change regardless of who you testify for?
No, it does not.
Where are you presently employed, Mr. Burgess?
Sure. So I'm presently employed with a company known as Aperture, and I'm located in their Dallas office.
Is Aperture
Keep
a
that same
company that
energy
has
for
offices
ARCA,
outside of Texas?
Brennan.
Sure. So Aperture is a company.
Do you think the reason Americans are so fat is because we all eat bread with so many preservatives? No, it's because you eat too much and move too little. Doesn't matter what you eat. Fat is a pure plus minus. You can eat bread all day long as you move more than you obtain the calories from the bread. If you want to live off sugar, fine. You just have to figure out what is the amount of energy that you put in your body. If it's 10,000 calories, you just need to move, expending 10,001 calories, and you will lose weight.
Facts.
All of this, I'm on keto. I'm a vegetarian. I'll never eat anything but meat. Doesn't matter. Diet is important, but the only thing that's important is less calories will make you thinner.
Across the country. So they've got a number of
And use
locations
the
and
Thigh
offices,
Master.
and they offer a number of service lines
Can't run
specifically
from a
related
bad
to
diet.
forensics.
It's like
Do you
90%
ever
of
work
your weight
on
loss.
different cases or scenarios with people in the Texas office?
Yes, I do. Sure. Go ahead.
Do you ever work with other employees of Aperture outside of the Texas office?
Yes.
Even if you're menopausal, it's just a plus-minus game. You just have to expend more energy than you take in. The problem is it can be harder to expend the energy, but then you have to reduce your intake.
So I do occasionally
That's the only way to lose
with
weight.
other
Burn more
experts
calories
in
than
the
you
Texas
intake.
offices as well as the
Period.
other offices across the country.
This
In
diet
this
ain't
case,
going to do it
was there
for you.
another professional who worked with Aperture
Paleo diet,
that was related to this case that
It's
you
all about
talked about?
calories.
There was.
And who was that?
And yes, if you eat rabbit, only rabbit, you will die because there's no fat in it.
They call
Would
it
be
protein
Dr. Jensen
starvation.
Welcher.
Is Dr.
Yes.
Welcher's profession and job the same as yours?
No, it is not.
What's the difference between what you do and what Dr. Judd Welcher does?
Sure. So what I do is investigate digital devices that can range from cell phones to vehicle modules to computer systems. What Dr. Welcher does is specifically related to accident reconstruction and biomechanics.
So you are not an accident reconstruction engineer?
I am not.
You are focused on the data?
I am focused on the data.
Did you ever publish any writings or papers regarding the area of your expertise?
Sure. So I have published 2 papers, specifically one related to damaged
Baker's got
devices.
more
In the
books than
Journal
you.
of Punjab.
Only
It's
2?
event data recorders, which is your black
Slacker.
box or your airbag control module.
Hey,
Wait until ARCA comes up.
the guy who did his own program had written 5 blog posts that was peer reviewed. So come on now, we're not playing in the major leagues when we're talking about experts here. But yeah, impressive.
And specifically related to developing proof of concepts, because a lot of times these modules will store data in different places on the module. Proof of concepts are ways to verify and validate where that data is stored, so you're not missing data.
So the first article that you wrote about damaged modules, was that peer reviewed?
It was.
And was it accepted?
It was accepted.
Could you tell us briefly what peer reviewed means?
Sure. So peer review is a process of your peers or colleagues reviewing your work and determining that it's valid.
Is peer reviewed articles often relied upon by other experts in the field?
Yes, they are.
You said that the first article you mentioned had to do with damaged modules. Is that one of the areas specifically that you're going to talk to us about in this case?
Sure. So it is specifically one of the areas I'm going to talk about in this case. And to kind of go back a little bit, the idea of proof of concept applies not only to damaged modules, but also other vehicle modules such as infotainment and telematics modules.
I don't think we're at infotainment and telematics yet. So if we can just understand a little better, very basically, what is proof of concept in action? What does that
Can we
mean?
skip
Sure.
forward?
So proof of concept is taking a vehicle module, for example. This is typically an unidentified vehicle module that other individuals have not looked at or verified what is recorded and where it is stored. So a proof of concept is taking exemplar modules and doing tests on those modules. So creating events that are recorded within the modules. A lot of times when those modules are damaged in vehicle crashes or if they're just unsupported by your forensic tools, you will have to go to what's called chip off or chip swap forensics. That is specifically taking the chips off of the circuit board. So think of the hard drives from your computer, moving those hard drives to another module, a working module, to recover the data and validating that you've recovered all the data that you would expect to see.
Are there times and cases or studies where you need to recover data because it's not available to you through the traditional methods?
Yes, many times.
Let me ask you. You said
This
there
is
was a
the guy
second
who
article.
couldn't
What was
remember
that
bits
second
from
peer review
bytes.
article about?
Sure. So that second peer-reviewed article was specifically related to mobile forensics, specifically iPhones, and how they track your device interactions as well as speed and location data and validating how accurate that data was.
In addition to talking to us about damaged modules, as you're going to do in this case, are you also going to talk to us about the timing information? from mobile
Yes.
phones?
Yes, I am.
Is this where we get the drift
When
of
did you first
23
become involved
seconds?
in the study of this case?
So I first became involved in this case around October of 2020.
Well, this is the guy who changed his report mid-case. So it's
a
going to
week
be fun
ago.
seeing him on cross.
24.
He changed his report on the 11th or some shit, the 9th.
Yeah, didn't he
8th.
change it in
The
response
8th.
to something else? And the
He changed it on response to a report that was delivered on the 7th, which means it's impossible for him to do.
He filed a report on all the electronic nonsense. ARCA responded to his report and said, this guy's an idiot and we can't understand what the hell he's talking about. And then the day after ARCA turned in their report, he amended his to change the 23
It
seconds.
was after he saw Whiffen because he put that in the report, Alessi said.
Yeah, but it was still the day the ARCA was delivered on the 7th. He made a new report on the 8th, which was turned over on the 11th to the defense, even though Hanky Panky lied about it and said it was turned over on the 8th. And this is the evidence that Plevin Wilt's claim will prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the new chip-off guy, but it's also the guy who chose that hairstyle, who has a CV that's a little dubious, and who has done 2 peer-reviewed reports and done 700 hours of training over 10 years.
When you became involved in October of 2024,
I've got more time than
in
in
receipt of
Madden
any
than
information
this guy's got
or
in his
reports or
career.
documents to look at.
Yeah.
Yes. So I did receive some raw data as well as some photographs from the vehicle in this case.
When you say raw data from the vehicle, what does that mean specifically?
Sure. So again, when you take these chips or hard drives off of these modules, you can read those chips individually and recover any type of data that is recorded on those chips. So when I reference raw data, that is looking at that data in hexadecimal format, which is as close to binary data, which is what computers use to store data in, as you would want to get when reviewing this type of data.
When you receive data, does that presume it's already been downloaded by somebody?
Yes, that is correct.
In addition to looking at the data, you receive photographs. Do you know where those photographs came from?
I do not know specifically who those photographs came from, but I do know those photographs came from an initial download attempt on those modules.
You said there was an initial download attempt. When you looked at the information you received, did you learn whether or not there was an attempt prior to your involvement in October 2024 to obtain data from the modules or the so-called black box in the Lexus vehicle?
Yes, so there was an attempt to download data from the modules in the vehicle.
Did you understand whether or not there was a chip-off process, whether anybody attempted to take the computer chips off the computer boards and learn or download the data?
Yes, there was an attempt to remove various chips off of the boards and read those chips individually.
Did you have an opportunity to read any reports submitted regarding that earlier process that occurred before you even got involved?
Not before I got involved. Well, sorry. Yes, I was able to read a report from a individual known as AG Speak about that process, that initial process.
Did you learn who conducted, the name of the person that actually conducted the original process before you were involved in this case?
Yes, I understand that person to be Miss Maggie Gaffney.
You know generally when Miss Gaffney engaged in trying to download information from the computer boards of the defendant's car?
Yeah, if I can recall correctly, that was around December of 2023.
And in your review of materials and study materials, did you receive additional materials?
But what if the binary data identifies as non-binary data? That's funny. That's funny.
Yes, I did receive additional crash reports, just detailing the events of the night.
When you say crash reports, what does that mean?
So that's going to be crash reports from the Massachusetts State Police.
Is a crash report just a written report or is it data?
No, it's just a report, no data.
Did you receive any other reports from any other individuals or experts?
No, not at that time.
Did you later, over time, receive any more additional information during your studies?
Yes, I believe so. And let me reference my report just so I don't misspeak.
You have to ask the judge before you do it.
Let me ask for the court's permission before you do that.
Sure, sorry.
Yes.
So I did, again, I reviewed a vehicle forensics report by AG Speak. I reviewed documentation that was identified to me as evidence review, a prior testimony of Trooper Garino, and I reviewed some surveillance videos as well as a report by Mr. Whiffen.
When did you receive any study or reports from?
Sorry, I zoned out a bit. Where did he go to school?
I wasn't listening all that much to that stuff.
I think I was too confused about his hair.
I was so distracted by his hair when he bent his head down that I had no idea what he said.
But he said he had, before his training as a digital guy, he was fooling around with auto presses, which can take your arm off. But did he say, I went to the greatest university in America, the Ohio State, or did he say that he went to Gaffney's community college? Did he mention anything about that? We just went through 2 DNA experts where I was about to go find out if my black powder blunderbuss, well, no, it's not a blunderbuss.
Blunderbuss.
My black powder rifle might still work because it's a little slow. I didn't hear one school mentioned where he got his degree.
No, but he is certified in Cellbrite, Magnet, and Axiom. That's all I got. Then he also worked in the automotive industry with focus on presses and hydraulics. Whatever.
Yeah,
that
but
means.
that's funny because all of those axioms and that is company given seminars. You sign up with Axiom and then you'll go on a 3-day course in Axiom software. You sign up with I can be a Cellbrite expert. I'll just pay the money and they will give me a
what
class in
confuses me
how
is
to
that
use it.
this douche was then giving seminars. Like is it an MLM sort of thing that Cellbrite now expects you to go out and give seminars?
No, he works in a field where, so he probably took 2 classes, but all the other ones we have. So after high school, I went to the military, and then I went to the most prestigious university in America, the Ohio State, where I got my undergrad in basket weaving, and I got my master's in napkin folding.
Yeah, I guess it didn't happen.
What did this guy have his master's in?
So Better tweeted he wasn't asked about his education, so that's interesting.
Yeah, that's funny because we had that 2-3 different time zones when he went to school. Again, sometimes when you have to bite into a big old pile of poo, you just do it so you get it over with. Don't let Alessi force feed you the poo. Just bite the poo.
I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
He said some continuing education from George Washington because I've completed one from the same university. I don't know where George Washington is.
I think it's an online university, but it's, I think, geared toward more working professional people wanting to go back to school in an expedited way.
He got his master in baiting.
Oh my God.
Mr. Guino, do you remember?
I do not remember exactly.
Okay. Was it recently, some time ago?
It would have been some time ago, probably late 2024.
Brandon, that would be Michigan State.
After we got involved.
Last year?
Yes.
And how about Mr.
You are
Whitten's
right,
report?
Michigan State.
Mr. Whitten's report, I believe I received in January of this year.
In the video, do you know when you received any video?
It would have been this year. I don't remember the exact dates.
Was it last month, months ago?
No, probably around January or February as well. Well, I take that back. It would have been early January, maybe late December.
Okay. I want to ask you just generally so we have a general perspective on this. When you began your study, was there something specifically that you were looking for?
There was. So specifically what we're looking for when we do a chip off on these vehicle modules, we're expecting to see one of 2 things. User data.
Yeah, I know that it's not important what school you went to. I yell about this all the time. But normally it's something I'll yell about because the prosecutor or the defense will try and drag you through everything they did since junior high. But this guy was surprisingly fast.
In a raw hexadecimal format or a file system where user data is stored.
Were there certain events that you were focused on relative to the data in the defendant's Lexus?
Baker, can
Sure.
you
So
pause?
there were specific.
What in the nebulous F is a hexadecimal, and why are we bringing this into the lexicon too? Because
Because that's an 8 side, right? X is 8.
I
No,
get it's an
octo is
8-sided
8, hex is
decimal,
7.
but
It's a 7.
7.
whatever it is, why are we now introducing another thing that I'm not going to understand in the advancements of mathology and technology? I can tell you, speaking as a normal person who hates technology, this is going to go right over my head, and I'm going to hexadecimal myself to sleep.
Probably why they use it. Totally not a Russian will be creaming his pants because he's hexadecimal. Ooh. Show me on the bytes where the bit touched you.
Specific events that we were looking for specifically. That would be including time-stamped
16
ignition-on events or power-on events, as well as other data.
Did you have any information or understanding that there were text stream events that you were to focus on?
Yes, I did have an understanding that there were text stream events located in a airbag control module.
How many text stream events were you focused on?
2 text stream events.
Could you just generally characterize those 2 events?
Sure. So one event has been identified as a 3-point turn maneuver, and the other has been identified as a backing maneuver.
Now, the studies of those events, is that the role of the accident reconstructionist?
Yes, it is.
So then what was your role related to your specific role related to those 2 characterized events, the 3-point turn event and the backing maneuver event?
Sure. So within that text stream data, those events are documented with what's called a time count. So that's going to be a running timer from the time the vehicle powers on or the ignition comes on. So that counter will count seconds incrementally. And specifically, the focus was looking for any time-stamped data that would offer when that power-on event occurred.
I didn't like that movie.
Did you put together a PowerPoint presentation regarding your assessment of some of this case?
Yes, I did.
Oh, dear God,
Your
no.
approach?
Yes.
Where's my hurt me doll? Because this is going to hurt my brain.
This is the PowerPoint presentation that went from like 140 something pages
Handing you a package, you
down
recognize
to
that?
142.
Yes, I do. And what is that?
That
and
is
then
my
down to,
PowerPoint
like,
presentation.
36 or something. And
Sure.
Arca had no idea what he was talking about.
Presentation you put together?
Yeah.
Yes, it appears so.
And does this reflect some of your study of this case?
It does reflect some of the study in this
It's
case.
Brennan asking.
Entire comprehensive study of everything that you learned, or is it an overview?
No, it is an overview.
For course permission, I would mark this for identification. I intend to use this for course permission as a chalk.
Okay, so we'll mark it for identification.
Is it SS for identification?
Oh, dear God.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
So I want you to teach us a little bit about the computers in a motor vehicle. Is there one computer, like a black box in an airplane?
No, so there's actually many, depending on the vehicle, there could be hundreds with very specific functions to what they're, what they're meant to do.
Tell us a little bit about why there's a need or why many computers are used in a single vehicle.
Sure. So there's so many functions within your modern vehicle nowadays. So for instance, your infotainment module, that is a computer that operates your
Lally had the 2 first guys because they were not important.
radio, your head unit. So that's going to be your obviously your radio, any type of built-in navigations, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. There's what's called a telematics module. That's going to be what actually allows the vehicle to communicate with the internet services. So when you look at, if you've got an app that can track your vehicle or unlock your doors, that's being allowed through that telematics module.
With the court's permission, I'd like to have Ms. Gilman show page 3 of the PowerPoint.
Okay. Any objection, Mr. Lassie?
No objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
Sir, on your PowerPoint page 3, you have a chalk or diagram of a car. You may have a pointer in front of you if it helps.
Sure.
You could direct your attention to the TV to your right.
This is why nerds shouldn't do telematics report. Where's the telematics module? In the front seat? The body control is in the passenger or the driver door. The airbag control module is in the front right panel. Again, if you have visual learners like I am, I don't see this as the airbag module, which would be in the airbags that's in the center console. Nope, the airbag module is located in the front left corner panel. And the
Yeah,
telemetrics module is in the headrest of the driver's car, the driver's seat.
I kind of see it being the window.
Yeah, because there's no seat depicted behind you. Yeah. This is why nerds shouldn't be allowed to have PowerPoints.
And he
More
didn't look
power
at any of
to
the
me.
other. So only the ones that are in red font, are those the only ones that he's talking about now, or the only ones he checked?
Yes,
Because
maybe. I don't
as
know. Again, let's see.
Could you explain to us what this diagram shows us?
Sure. So this is a diagram that just shows, a small number of modules that you can find in specifically the Lexus in this case. Again, what we're focused on and looking at is the infotainment module and the telematics module in orange. For example, there are other modules known as the body control module and the airbag control module, the engine control module, which runs your vehicle. In addition to that, there are other modules that operate your door locks and unlocks, your windows, and various other functions.
When you use the word module, is that the same thing as a separate computer, or is it different somehow?
Yeah, so that using Parlance module would be referring to a separate computer within the vehicle.
Do all of these separate computers in the vehicle connect with each other?
They do. So all of these modules are connected to one another, and they do communicate with each other.
The information that would be commonly referred to as black box, or information that captures some of an event, where would that be in this diagram?
Sure. So the black box would be in the airbag control module.
And then as far as the radio system, you shared with us that's the infotainment module?
Yes. So the radio system is going to be, that data is going to be stored within the infotainment module.
In the telematics module, specifically, what are we looking for there?
Sure. So the telematics module, again, is a module that allows communication with internet services. So if you've got an app on your phone that you can unlock or lock your doors, that's the telematics module is allowing that function to occur.
Do all make and model cars have the same setup as this diagram?
No, they do not. It will vary.
Does it vary from car maker to car maker?
It does. It varies from car maker to car maker. It varies from trim level as well.
Could two different cars from the same manufacturer, same style, could they have different components in those cars?
They could, yes.
Why is that?
Sure. So during the manufacturing phase, depending on cost and other things, manufacturers will source these modules from different third-party manufacturers. So one vehicle may have a module from, for instance, LG Electronics. One may have a module from Denso. And depending on how those individual manufacturers implement that software and hardware, they may record and store different types of data.
So from your experience, you've reviewed or you studied a 2022 Lexus, and then you see another Lexus, whether it's 2022, 2023. Would you be able to say you've seen it, you've already done it, or do you have to individually look at each car?
Sure. So you would typically look at, and to correct, it's a 2021 Lexus. But if you want to understand what may be stored in a subject module, you would take an exemplar vehicle and conduct some testing to determine what is being recorded and how that data is being recorded.
You mentioned that you were looking for time information, or power on information regarding two events.
Correct.
Can we characterize those events as text stream events?
Yes, we can.
Do people sometimes refer to them as triggering events? Are they often or sometimes referred to as something else other than a text stream event?
They can be referred to as other things besides text stream events.
Can you give us an example of what else they may be referred to as?
Sure. So that would be triggering events.
Why is it called a triggering event?
Sure. So the event is actually created when there's a trigger, and those trigger thresholds will vary and could be for a number of different reasons.
When a text stream event happens, or so-called triggering event, what happens in the data?
Sure. So when a text stream event happens, when that trigger is met, there are certain data parameters or data types that are recorded for a specific time frame.
In this case, how many of those events were you looking at?
Just one.
When you mentioned time, I want to have you explain to us a little bit about time. You said there's a running clock. Can you explain that in a little more detail and simply what that means?
Sure. So in what's recorded within the text stream events, I'll refer to as a running clock. Essentially what it is when the vehicle is powered on, this clock starts the run and it counts seconds from power on. So when you press the ignition on, this clock starts. And when there is a text stream event that occurs within that cycle or within that ignition on, that is recorded as the time that trigger occurred.
Does that give an actual time, like when you look at your watch or you look at your cell phone?
It does not give an actual time, yeah.
Okay, are you still reviewing the chalk?
We can take it down if it pleases Attorney Lisi.
Thank you.
So you were getting back to the clock.
Yeah. He needs to go and find out if it had an LG module and then go test that module and make sure it's the 25-X2 set module, not the 25-ZX2 module. So he knows exactly what's in it. But
Yeah.
yeah. Even if all the computers in the car says the car hit a pedestrian, that doesn't change the fact that John O'Keefe was not hit by a car. I agree, Hulda. But the problem is they will now try and infer that, like they did in the first trial, that a 6-degree turn on the steering wheel plus a half mile per hour decrease in speed shows an impact. That's not what an impact looked like.
You said it's like a running clock. Is that like a stopwatch?
Yeah, that could be referred to as a stopwatch.
Where is that running clock kept in the data?
Sure. So that running clock is kept within the airbag control module.
Is that the so-called black box part of the data?
That is correct.
With the running clock, how do you determine the actual time as it relates to, say, for example, your digital watch or your iPhone or another clock?
Sure. So in that instance, you would need to have an event that occurs, such as a power on event with a timestamp to reference back that running clock.
When you got involved in this case and you looked at the information that was previously downloaded by Ms. Gaffney, was there any data regarding power on, power off to mark that time?
From the initial download, there was not.
When you involved yourself in your study, what was your primary focus as far as information you wanted to get and why?
Sure. So primary focus when I initially got brought on was to look at the modules and see if there was any data that was not recovered. And then specifically, again, looking at any timestamped data that may have been recorded within the modules.
You talked about the differences in modules. In your PowerPoint, did you provide a couple of photographs of the modules so we can see what you're talking about?
Yes, I did.
With the court's permission, I'd like to put on page 4 of the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Could you explain to us the photograph on the left and then the photograph on the right?
Sure. So the photograph on the left is kind of a top-down view of the infotainment module from the Lexus. Photograph on the right is a top-down view of the telematics module from the Lexus.
Are these modules from this specific car, or is this a general photograph of a car and how it works?
These modules are from this specific vehicle.
From the car you studied?
Correct.
On the left infotainment module, you have different manufacturers. Why is that?
Sure. So again, these modules are not manufactured by Lexus or Toyota themselves. They are manufactured by third parties that are providing these modules to the car manufacturer. And these are just some examples of what we have seen within these specific vehicles and what type of manufacturers provide modules for these vehicles.
If we could turn to page 5, please. When you looked at the data that was provided in this case, did you draft a report?
Yes, I did.
Your initial impressions, can you share with us what your initial impressions were?
Sure. So initial impressions were that data was missed from the initial download.
What type of data do you think was missed, or did you conclude was missed from the initial download?
Sure. So that would be, essentially all of the user data was missed during that initial download.
How did you conclude or come to the opinion that data was missed on the initial download?
Sure. So reviewing the raw data, you can see that what we would expect to find, which would be things like contacts or from devices or device connections or timestamped data, was not there in those initial downloads.
When you first looked at the data and you came to the conclusion that there was missing data, did you have a working theory on what you thought or how you thought the information was missing?
Sure. So I did have a working theory initially.
2 DNA analysts that couldn't prove anything, and now this guy is going to say that you can tell by the telematics that she hit him.
Of why the data was missing.
And what was your initial theory?
Sure. So
Also,
if
he's gonna
I'll
say
reference
the other
kind of to
people
the
are
slide a little
crap at their
bit.
job.
You can take that down.
Sure. Yeah, well, it was Gaffney.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
It's not that good.
When you had your
break
initial
the
theory of
telematics
data
trying to
missing,
get
what
it
was
the
it based
hell
on?
out of the
Sure.
car.
So the initial theory was based on 2 things. Either one of 2 things initially I thought could have happened, and that was a bad or partial read of the chips, or it could be that the data-bearing chip that we are looking for was overlooked and not downloaded.
When your first thoughts were that this was a partial read of chips, was there anything about the chips when you looked at them that you concluded or came to an opinion on?
Sure. So initially, when I was reviewing the data and reviewing the part numbers on the chips, we can see what how much storage is on each chip, and that can kind of get complicated. But essentially, what we're looking at is data stored as either bits or bytes. That is represented as a capital B or a small lowercase b. So initially, upon reviewing the data and with the assumption that a competent examiner would not miss a chip or a device or data-bearing chip on the board, I misinterpreted and
go together.
wrote a lowercase or a capital B when I should have wrote a lowercase b in my notes, which led me to believe that there was a partial download of those initial chips.
Now, as a forensic,
So you fucked up in your initial report because, and you just said it was important to pay attention to details, and you messed up, and you had to be told by the defense that you're too dumb because he thought that it was bytes and not bits of data. That's why Plevin got a hard on, because they thought there was a lot of missing data out there. But in reality, there wasn't. It was just this absolute stud of a man who misread it.
Analyst, do you rest on your initial impressions or do you go through a continued process?
No, so I do not. So just like the scientific method, if you have a working theory, you then review and research to either prove or disprove that theory.
And did you engage in that scientific process in working theory?
I did.
And how soon after you wrote the report did you realize there may be another source of the material?
Sure. So, I will clarify a little bit. That initial was not a report; it was just a protocol that was proposed. But I believe that there was a supplemental protocol written within a week or two of the initial protocol.
And when you used the scientific method and studied the theory that you had, what did you decide or what did you learn?
Sure. So upon further review and research, I discovered that there was a SD card or a micro SD card that was on the circuit boards of one of the modules that was never looked at.
Now, you weren't present at the original process?
That is correct.
When you looked at the modules, those computer boards, did you notice anything about them that happened during the original process?
Sure. So I did notice during the chip off process, what you do to take these chips off is you apply heat to them. So that essentially liquefies the solder, which is a low temperature metal that connects the chips to the board and makes those connections so the board can communicate. And there was some damage caused from that initial chip off.
And again, why would you take the chips off a board if they're already attached? Why would you need to do that?
Sure. So when you don't have, typically if you think about downloading data from your cell phone, you have a USB port on your cell phone that you can easily plug that into a computer. That's not the case with vehicle modules. So you have to remove these chips from the board, and then you've got programmers or readers that will read the data from these chips.
Did you have a chance to study the boards that were already accessed during an earlier chip-off process before you got involved?
Why don't you have that? And I'm just asking because every time I go to do anything with my car, when it has a warning light or something, they put in a reader that'll talk to the computers on the... Why can't you just use that one?
Maybe it's a different module. Who the hell knows?
I don't know, but it seems to me that's kind of stupid because it's just a computer port.
It seems like the only reason they would do the chip off thing is if it was like an extremely damaged computer, right? Like if the computer was broken, like from a real bad wreck or something, then you would use the chip off to get that data. I don't know why you would do it otherwise.
This is Mr. Burgess, the guy who couldn't determine a bit from a byte and who will tell you that she hit him. Why do OBD2 scanners communicate with all these modules then? Yeah, that's my question because, again, if it's my tire pressure measuring thingy or if it's an engine warning, they use the same data port, and that's two different circuits, I would imagine.
Correct, Maria Miles.
Yes.
Yes,
Also,
I did have an
isn't there an
opportunity to
easier
study some
way than
photographs of
taking
the
a chip that could damage it to get it off the board?
Not if the board is unreadable, but I don't understand why the board would be unreadable if it hasn't been in a crash. It seems like they fucked something up and then they have to desolder the chip. All the modules are connected. Karen Reed's car didn't even back up in front of Fairview that night, let alone hit John. They had to play some real games to get us to trial. Probably something like that. I'm an engineer. I can download on my laptop anything from my car's data. I even changed the boot up screens on my car. Yeah, and that's the thing I don't understand. Why would the security system not be easily? Because again, if you come out to a crash and you want to find out what was the gas pedal, you would just put it into that little data port and say, make me a reading on that system. But apparently Lexus are kind of a cheap Japanese car because it's a Toyota. And do we know anything about
the
Japanese
high-end
cars?
brand of Toyota, right?
No.
Yeah.
We know that Toyotas are really known for making cheap cars, and their Lexus brand is made from all the leftover products that they just go to the nearest Chinese sweatshop and pick out of the garbage can.
I don't think that's accurate.
Could we have page 14, please?
Any objections?
Okay, if we could turn to page 15. Tell us what this is, please.
Sure. So this is the infotainment module that you saw earlier. This is just two photographs during the disassembly process of taking that module apart.
Could you zoom in on the right photograph, Ms. Gilman?
Why is this relevant? Nobody understands what the hell any of this is.
Yeah, I mean,
That's-
you have
that's fine right
actively
there.
cut
Could you
off
share
my
with us
brain right
A little
now.
bit about what this is.
Sure. So this is how I received the modules when we took a secondary look at them. Essentially, this is if you see.
Let's say you can't use the OBDDII port or whatever it's called. Couldn't you just read one of the ports on the board? The thing I don't get is it makes no sense that you need to chip off these 2 memory chips to get access to them. This is just a motherboard or not a motherboard, but it's just a computer board that makes sure to read and write whatever you need. Why aren't any of these ports a read port? That just to me seems counterintuitive, because what if
that white one on the left that's got the clear spot that you plug in on the other end?
Yeah,
that thing on the left it's got a clip that goes in it and it plugs in right there. You could probably read it from that port.
You could probably, I don't know. I don't do cars.
From the right photographs, there's many boards that are contained within this infotainment module. This specific board that we're looking at here on the right is the board where they removed chips from. What we're looking at is the circuit board itself, as well as 2 components that were previously removed during that initial download attempt.
So if you can't read the chips on the board, if you remove them, is there a tool that you can use to actually read the individual chips in isolation?
Yes, so there is tools, various tools that you can use to read those chips and read the data
There
from
are
those chips.
tools.
You can have 16, please.
We all picked.
Wait, they were
emails
off when he
correctly.
got them?
Correctly.
Yeah,
Yes.
because they took them off because back in the day before they hired him.
So those chips could literally have any data on them that they wanted to have on them when they were sent.
Yeah. And again, you would expect it to be really easy to recover data from a crash registering part of the car. Kind of like why the black box is orange and you can hear and see whatever happened in the entire plane before it fell down.
Well, but
Yeah.
also if you're a tech that has to work on these, they don't take these boards out and like chip things off if they need to fix something, do they?
Well,
I mean,
they could. It's memory chips, so they could take one off and put a new one on if you have a corrupted one. But you don't take one off to go read it to figure out, oh, this part of the card did something. You would just read the card because it's a memory chip. It's the same memory chip that you can put in your digital camera. It just looks different because it's soldered to the board. You just need to read data. It's not like you need to get it off the board because then the magic fairies can come and deliver it to you in the middle of the night.
Right.
It's
that board holds all the information that they took these individual chips off to find.
Yeah.
Except that they took them off first and sent them separate. So who knows where the chips that were sent actually came from or how they were manipulated before they got to this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the whole module gets replaced, not just the chip. Well, I've seen people who do like motherboard repairs and stuff like that. You can, again, cost efficiency, no. In a car, yeah, you'll just get a new. But again, there's no reason to just chip off one memory chip to read it. It doesn't make sense to me.
Can you tell us what you see here?
Sure. So what you see here is two of the components that were initially removed from the board during that first download attempt. I've documented an additional chip that was still on the board that was not identified during that initial download on this side of the circuit board. And then I've got photographs matching the chip and where its placement was initially on the circuit board.
Can we have page 17, please? And what do we see there?
Sure. So this is some of the damage that occurred to the circuit board itself during the initial chip off download attempt.
Do you have a pointer on the stand?
I do, yes.
Could you show us what the left photograph point out what you mean by damage?
Sure. So right here on the left part, you've got these 2 highlighted blocks. So what this is if you remember back to the last slide, the larger.
They used way too much heat. They burnt the
motherboard.
Yeah.
The circuit board.
How can they be this inept of doing anything? I bet you they couldn't put a stick in a shit without ruining both of them.
Chip that we were looking at. This is directly underneath that. So when you're removing that larger chip, what you're doing is you're applying heat to it. If you apply too much heat during that chip off process, the underside of the board will actually heat up and you'll have chips fall off of the underside of the board. So that's what's occurred here on the left side. On the right side, as you heat up these chips, if you're not careful, as you pick them up off the board, you can displace other components. And that is what you see right here in this highlighted box here is a small passive component.
Yes, I believe they will.
Component that has been displaced where it should be parallel.
What is the risk of damaging components when they're taking off the board during a tip-off?
Sure. So the risk of that is causing damage that could be internally that we can't see. And if you want to put the chips back on the board and assemble everything back together, it may not work appropriately.
In addition to seeing the damage with your eyes on these photographs, do you look at data when you engage in the analysis whether or not you think data is missing?
Yes, I do.
Could we have page 6, please? Could you tell us what this is?
Sure. So this is just some examples of what user data would look like and what we're expecting to see when we look at the raw data from the chips that are removed from the board. So typically there's 2 ways to look at data, and one way is looking at the file system, similar to the file system you would see on your computer when you store documents. Same thing exists in vehicle modules. There are instances though where you cannot rebuild the complete file system, and you've got to actually look at the raw data in hexadecimal format. So that hex data, the bottom photograph or screenshot, is what that would look like in hexadecimal format.
When you looked at the data that was provided during the original chip-off or process and was produced by Ms. Gaffney, were you able to, at this point, identify any date and time or power on or off information that you were looking for?
No, I was not.
You mentioned that you went beyond the original data from the testing and you discovered something on the board?
Yes, that's correct.
Could we have page 18, please? Tell us what you found.
Sure. So this is a micro SD card that I identified on the subject vehicle and later validated that existed on an exemplar vehicle as well.
Could you use the pointer? Sure. I know there's a red square, but I want you to describe for us what you saw and what that meant to you.
Sure. So if you look at this side of the circuit board, obviously this is a zoomed in view, but what you see is this kind of underneath the SD card is a silver casing. That is the slot that the SD card would go into, similar to the slot you would have on your computer. And again, what we're looking at is the SD card, just both sides, top and bottom.
You had mentioned earlier that when you looked at the data, you
like
believe
a
that there was...
computer, can't you just push it in, pull it out? But we had to burn it out.
Well, they didn't find this the first time. He found it doing the second thing. And it depends on if it's soldered into the slot.
Y'all, my brain is in a corner crying, and I am here without Mike and Ike's. I don't even...
Well, it'll probably get better on cross.
Data missing.
Thank you.
When you found this SD card and discovered this, what did you conclude?
Sure. So at that point, I concluded that the data that we were missing was most likely stored on this SD card.
Did it appear whether or not this SD card had ever been removed from the board?
No, it did not.
Did you receive any information that this SD card was ever studied or downloaded?
No, I did not.
How could you tell?
Could you just take this board and put it back in the car and use software to read it?
There are instances where you can do that. For this vehicle, though, we could not.
Why couldn't you?
Because you damaged.
Sure. So there
the board.
are commercial forensic tools that are
Not
available
you,
for
but-
vehicle systems. One of those tools is referred to, or is called Burla. Burla is a company that writes hardware and software, or develops hardware and software that pulls data from vehicles in a user-friendly way, so that non-technical people can gain access to this data without having to go through the steps that we did in this case.
When you discovered that,
So the technical people who did this used a method that non-technical people don't have to use, because you can just get Burla. But Gaffney, who works with tech, who actually has a company that works with tech, thought, let's just get the good old heat gun and get it all the way down there to unsolder the memory chips. Even though I'm so inept at unsoldering that I burned the chips on the other side. What if any damage could happen to the chips on the right side if she is that bad with a soldering, with a heat gun?
I don't know you guys. Oh, go ahead.
If all the data is stored on this little SD chip, all the missing data, as he says, right, is on this SD chip, why couldn't they just swap SD chips before they sent it to him?
Yeah.
Like if this SD chip is the key factor, and all of a sudden it's brand new information that hasn't been here for 3 years, what would stop a dirty, corrupt cop from just swapping SD cards?
Especially when there's no chain of custody on anything.
Right.
this SD
All right.
card and had
Also,
your
you guys,
hypothesis
I'd like
of the major
to
data on it.
announce the
Do you have
startup
conceptual-
of my business. Excellence starts with an A. But we are technological experts because we have both powered up our cars by filling them with gas and paying the attendant. I don't know anything about circuit boards, but I'm about the same level as Gaffney. So, Massachusetts, I'll be waiting for your call for my expert fees.
Yeah, and again, with this poor handling of just the memory chips, how, I don't know, Russian, heat? What if any effect does a mishold heat gun have on a memory chip? My computer gets really tired when I don't have enough cooling in it.
Concerns about simply removing the SD card and trying to read it?
Yeah, so anytime you see an SD card on a vehicle module, in the past there's research and there's documentation of finding these SD cards. Most of the time they are what's called command 42 locked. So what that means is there's a lock put in place. So if you take this SD card out, plug it into your computer is not going to recognize it. So the SD card is actually looking for a...
Oh, am I getting the wrong Gaffney? Sorry if it was the expert. Still, shitty job if you sorted it off. But I think it's the MSP who used the heat gun.
Passcode from the vehicle itself to unlock it and allow access to
Sorry,
the
According to his
then I got it
PowerPoint.
wrong.
Passcode.
Sure. So
According to
when
his
you don't have that
PowerPoint,
passcode, there are
Gaffney
ways
is the one
around
that
that lock. Specifically, if we look at the left photo, you can see there's a lighter shaded black area on the SD card. What that is it's a protective covering that is covering some what's known as technological pads, and those pads allow access to reading the data and bypassing that lock.
Is gaining access to an SD card on a board like this a simple process?
It is not a simple process.
Are there a lot of advanced studies on it?
There are advanced studies on it, and it is a in-depth process to recover this data and interpret it.
Are there any concerns that you had about spoiling or destroying the data if you tried to access the SD card without a passcode?
No, not that I'm aware of. There's no documentation or research that suggests you would spoliate or lose data by bypassing that lock.
Were you concerned at all in trying to get the information from the SD card about the process of it?
Yes, I was.
Why?
To get data from this SD card, we suspected that the user data that we were expecting was on this card. So in order to validate that user data existed on this card, we processed and went through a set of testing and validation on an exemplar vehicle.
What's an exemplar vehicle mean?
Sure. So an exemplar vehicle is a 2021 Lexus LX570 that is as close to the same trim and features that the subject vehicle was.
We could take that down, I'm Stillman. Why did you want a similar but very separate vehicle to do testing before you tried to crack into the SD card?
Sure. So, it's kind of multiple reasons. First, to validate that the process that we're theorizing to recover data is viable. But also, this is a vehicle that there's no documentation on as far as the data that is stored and the data, how it's recorded and what it means. So as well as being able to validate that process, we also wanted to do testing and create some of our own data and known data sets on the vehicle, so that when we got the data, we were able to look at it and compare it to our known data sets, and we were able to validate and correctly interpret what that data means.
Mr. Brennan, why don't we take our break right now?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, folks, we'll take.
I never say I was happy to see the fan, but God bless you, Celine Dion. Look, whatever, I can't say it. I've been assaulted by math and science all morning.
So it's the equivalent of putting a piece of tape over the slot of a cassette of VHS. Yeah. And everyone is asleep. And this is the pivotal evidence from the Commonwealth. This expert needs to come off 100% shining like a turd that's been buffed. Why?
Are you all the way live?
I'm all the way live.
It's fine. All I can say is once Alessi comes up there, it will be clear to you, Mo, just like it will to me.
I'm just saying that you need this expert to be your best witness, because we know from the last trial this is what they have. That there will be something, and apparently something completely new from the infotainment system that shows when she hit him. And if he has anything less than the backup cam, all the warning systems screaming like a banshee he's about to hit someone, and he's just doing the same thing the Trooper Proctor did, said a 6-degree turn in half a second and a deacceleration on half a mile per hour. I would, again, as I've done many a time, I would just fill out my taxes in Massachusetts and write, nope, you owe me.
Okay, so I do have a question. They say that the only way they do trigger events is with a stop clock that goes with the power on. do they have any way of testing which of these trigger events are actually the I hit John versus the tow truck versus her going in the morning?
Trust me, bro. Trust
If
me.
if you remember, we had a trial a year ago, and
I do,
everyone
but
who
I
looked at
blocked that
it,
out.
everyone who looked at it says there is at least 5 circles missing, up till 11 compared to what they claim they did to the car. So the triggering event that they claim was Karen Reed hitting John O'Keefe would have happened way later. But all of it is, trust me, bro, she hit him because of a 6-degree turn on the wheel and a half mile per hour. But you'll have to count backwards. And then you'll say, that doesn't line up with anything. Jamie sounds hangry. Someone want to buy her a fish sandwich. I don't... Pretty sure Jamie doesn't like fish.
I was about to say it's not Lent anymore. She doesn't have to.
Get to the effing point and explain it in English. Yes. That's my thing.
Also,
My backup center won't shut up if there's a squirrel 7 feet away on my bumper. Yeah, and that's unless you give me that data that she willfully, with everything blaring, collision, unless you can prove that to me and maybe even get me a little movie snippet of when she crashes into him, it's just going to be Trooper Paul over again. All over again. Well, I read the raw data, and this is what the key cycles tell me. But how can I line up the key cycles when the last time there was at least 5 key cycles missing?
Yeah, so I wonder if that's the missing data that he has found, like the Ark of the Covenant.
Missing keystrokes.
Yep.
Jamie, Red Snapper Sandwich Fund. Thank you so much.
Also, let's be real. Optics are a thing, and this is only me speaking, so I could be totally off base, but he looks like he's not allowed near schools. And I'm just saying, as a juror, I'm writing that down because at this point I am tired of the math talk, and I am just writing down insults about this man.
He looks like a burn victim.
Burn victim? God.
You're laughing.
The data will only say what I want it to say. Former Trooper Proctor. No, it was Trooper Gambrini who talked about Trooper Paul who talked about the phone data.
Trooper Paul.
They would need to know exactly how long her car had been running since start at the time the claim she hit John. If the car was started and never shut off before from the bar to John O'Keefe's home. Yeah, that's the thing, because it'll be that running tally. Last time they said that triggering events happened when something out of the ordinary happened. That's when it would do something, I'll better record it if there was an accident. Now he said, well, triggering event is just something that runs on a clock. And that clock can be off because he really needs to get that in there as well.
Julie Frazier, I get it. He was part of a, Bowling for Soup tribute band.
Oh my Lord.
I'm so mad that Krusty is saying Karen has a drinking problem and she's always been seen drinking. Is Karen being followed by these morons? Is this the other side's game plan now? Jackie, this has been their game plan since before the trial started. If you remember the last trial, they made that fake video of Karen and AJ and Yannetti outside of a bar and getting into a fight. They also spent a lot of time claiming that AJ and Karen had a relationship. AJ and Melanie Little had a relationship. There are texts where that was leaked by one who used to have the confidence of Krusty, where she said, can you go to this place to take photos of them? So yes, this is what the other side, the side that claims that they are not harassing people, the side that wishes that people's kids will die from the big C. the other side that says to people, you should go slit your and unalive yourself. That wonderful side are following Karen Reed all over the place in hopes they can get pictures. When they don't get pictures, they make pictures. So this is their play.
Yep.
And thank you, Island, for supporting Valhalla. This testimony is a triggering event. That is all.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
I love that everybody's talking about fish now.
Well, fish sticks are good, I'm gonna say. Like, I'm a 4-year-old though.
The chips wasn't damaged. Couple of small caps moved slightly. It wasn't missing off board. Board was, I don't know what, because apparently they ruined the board. I don't know. Krusty has the moral high ground. She has only lost 2 out of her 4 kids to the state. Yes.
Fair
And
point.
she only sounds slightly like Valhalla at the end of a Friday night live show at 8 in the morning.
I wondered who was going to put the Kanye West South Park fish meme up in Lefty.
Oh, God.
And Emma Rampure possibly butchered that. And by possibly, I mean totally.
Nope. I don't
Dillinger Arms, fish and chips with a bunch of malt vinegar. You had me at hello.
Maybe like a red snapper fillet fat sandwich with fish sticks and the chips on top, smothered in white sauce.
Oh, wait.
Oh.
Red snapper fillet fat Is that a thing?
Well, I'm trying to figure out if it's a single entendre because it's Brandon.
I know.
Unless he really needs to make this guy cry and cross. Yes. This is the single most important witness since Bukaki. So they really need to punch him hard in the face and keep punching him.
Well,
It sounded like a great sandwich.
yeah, because a fat sandwich to me, I picture like something like a stacked up sandwich, just full of stuff.
Oh. It's a Jersey thing. You just throw random-ish in there. Interesting.
But I thought fat sandwich just meant that instead of butter, you used fat on the bread.
No.
Like tallow?
Put us back in
Or
session. You
lard?
may be seated.
Yeah, kind of like you don't have that where sometimes when you make like something with very much some part of the pig with a lot of fat in it, you'll skim off the fat and then you'll put a little
Well, yeah, bacon grease is gold.
yeah, but you'll fry a little bit of onion in it so you get a little flavor to it, and then you'll put it on your bread. My dad loved it. I think it's horrible, but my dad loved that. Instead of using margarine or butter, you'll just use like pig fat with some roasted onions in it. He swore by it.
Sounds pretty good. I just have never heard of it.
Yeah, well.
That being said, you want to make a hill chuck woman mad, throw out her bacon grease.
Yeah, I save that stuff.
Well,
Whenever you're ready, Mr.
it wasn't that short of a break. We were just 10 minutes behind, but we always catch up.
He's going to start sweating that
Mr. Burgess, when we left off, we were talking about an exemplar vehicle that you were using for tests and studies. If we could put up page 9, please, Ms. Gilman.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what this is, Mr. Burgess?
Yes, so this is the photographs of the exemplar vehicle that we conducted testing on. So again, it's a 2021 Lexus LX570.
It's
and
good
the reasoning
with,
that we did this testing
cheese and,
was again to validate that the
mustard.
user data that we were expecting to see was stored on that SD card. Additionally, in addition to that, We were also looking to create a exemplar data set, so a known data set, and we did that by connecting these cameras here. There's a camera here looking straight out. There's a camera here looking at the infotainment screen. What those cameras are doing is they're synced together, and they're recording timestamps as well as they're recording any interactions that we have with the vehicle. So us opening the doors, turning on the vehicle, turning off the vehicle, driving the vehicle, interacting with the infotainment system is all being documented. And then that way we can go back when we get the data off of the SD card and we can compare it to that documentation.
How closely were you trying to match the exemplar vehicle to the defendant's vehicle?
Obviously, as closely as we could get. If I recall correctly, this is almost a perfect match to the subject vehicle.
If we could turn to page 20, please. Tell us what this shows. And Ms. Gilman, if you could you focus in on the top gray and white line part, if you could? A little further out, if you could.
Ooh, let's see Bev's contact list.
Oh, yeah.
Slide into Bev's
We'd like to
DM
see all
and
three
see
rows
what's
if
going
possible.
on.
Yeah, she can't figure that one out. Just highlight it and enhance
If
it.
not, we'll do it from a further view.
Ah, why are you so inept?
Could you share with us what this slide represents, Mr.
Sure.
Burgess?
So this slide represents a comparison between the exemplar data and the data from the subject Lexus. In this comparison, we're looking at navigation system software. So that's going to be the infotainment system software. There's a number of different softwares running on this infotainment system for various functions. So you can see here there's a firmware version for the Wi-Fi functionality as well as the OS version, the audio, the DVD function, and I believe there's a section for the CD or disc version. So what we're looking at is we're looking at the software versions that are running on the exemplar. We're comparing that to the software versions that are running on the subject, and those match. So we would expect to see the user data to be stored in the same way.
Is it common that an exemplar vehicle will match the Focus vehicle exactly like this?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's common or uncommon. I have seen it in the past. A lot of times with your newer vehicles, you'll probably notice some of them tend to update more often than others. For this one, it looks like the Lexus doesn't update quite as often. So we are able to see that the software versions are the same.
If we could take that down, please. And if you could remind us before we go into your findings in that SD card that was left behind. What was the most important thing you were looking for as far as data on that SD card?
Sure. So the most important thing we're looking for is timestamped data specifically related to power on or ignition on events.
If you were to find timestamp data for power on, power off ignition events, how would you use that? What would you use that in unison or comparison with the information that you already had?
Sure. So we would use that.
This Lexus is named Cora, but it's the same one. Yeah. Who paid for this Lexus? Did they break it as well?
In comparison with provided surveillance videos to compare and see how accurate those timestamps are and how consistent they are, specifically on the night of January or the morning of January 29th.
When you analyzed the SD card, did you get viable information?
Yes, we did.
What information did you get?
So we've got a couple different data types. We got contact lists from some of the connected devices, as well as serial numbers and phone numbers associated with the connected devices, call logs, and then power on and power off events.
Was your focus on what?
Well, this guy and Dr. Welcher are the ones that... this guy is even more sus because he's the only one on the aperture that doesn't have his school listed next to his name.
One particular aspect of that data?
Primarily, the focus was on the power on and off events.
And did you find information regarding power and power off events that could date and time?
Yes, we did.
If we could have number 29, please. 30. Can you share with us what you found?
Sure. So this is some screenshots from our exemplar testing. So again, these are from those cameras that I pointed out earlier. What we see when we go back and review this camera footage is we see when I press the ignition on button, there is actually a logo that appears on the infotainment screen as it's booting up. that time that logo appears on the screen is associated with a time that we see in the raw data, and that's in the hexadecimal data that is very small, so it's kind of hard to see. But essentially what you have is you've got a date and you've got a time in UTC, and then you've got a identifier that suggests that the vehicle has been powered on. So we've got 4 of these tests that we can kind of compare back to and determine that this is the time that the infotainment system powers on and that first logo screen appears. And then through testing, we can identify that that is approximately ignition on is approximately 3 seconds before that timestamp.
So do I understand if you press the button to start the vehicle, there's a 3-second delay before the actual vehicle starts?
Correct. So not the actual vehicle starting. So you press the ignition on button, there's a 3-second delay in when the infotainment system powers on.
Is there any way, Ms. Gilman, to focus in on one of those 2 photos? Can you tell us what this information is?
Sure. So this is those camera angles. And what you see is I'm pressing the ignition on at this time. In that second photo on the right, you'll see that this is specifically approximately 3 seconds after I press that ignition on, and you see the Lexus logo appearing on the infotainment module.
Let me ask you something about the clocks while we're here. You see a local time on there?
Yes, I do.
Is that local time measured by a particular clock system?
Sure. So that's measured by our reference equipment. So we're using what's called VBox equipment to capture these videos. So here, that local time is actually UTC time. So it's not actually local time for this area. So that could be a little, that could be an error in how that's reporting. But essentially what we're seeing is the infotainment system is powering on at that exact time of 21:48:08.
And this was for power on. Can we have number 31, please? How's this different than the one we just looked at?
Sure. So this is power off. So this is myself pressing the ignition to power off the vehicle.
I'm sorry, how can it say UTC and local time? That should be 5-hour difference in these 2 times.
Yeah.
Also,
I know the car could be running on UTC time, but if he then writes local time, then it should have been at 6 o'clock instead of at 9 o'clock.
so we're saying most of this man's scientifical
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
experiments involved mounting GoPros into the car and turning it on and off.
Yeah, and then go back and look at the event log after.
And what we see at this exact time when you power off and press the ignition button, the screen on the infotainment system becomes blank, and associated with that, it powers off, and you see a log within the raw data that indicates that.
You mentioned that you found power on, power off information. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. So through this testing,
There's a
what we were
2-minute
able to do is see that there are time-stamped power on and off events for when the infotainment system is recording a power on and power off. And then we validated that with the exemplar testing.
Ultimately, were you able to use that power on, power off timestamped information to identify the times of the later 2 events, the tech stream events, the 3-point turn and the backing maneuver?
Yes, in combination with other data, we were able to determine that.
Did you test the power on, power off data?
Yes, we did.
Could we have number 32, please?
We're going to get a video of him turning the car on.
Can you tell us what this is?
Sure.
All right, I have a
is-
problem. I have a problem. So the first hex code he displayed had the exact same time that he has on his PowerPoint, 21:48:08. The next one he had shown was 2 minutes off.
It was?
Yes.
I-
So the
I
next
tried to
time he
look-
shows the hex data, the clock on his PowerPoint says 22:16:32, but his hex data says 12:14:32. 22:14:32. So how did
No,
he
it
all of a
says
sudden?
22:16:32 down here.
That is not a 6, my friend. I don't.
That is
believe
a 6.
That
Why am
looks like a 4 to me.
Yeah, but it is a 6 because the next one is 22:17:20.
It's a weird 6, but it is either that or
Yeah.
it's the pound or the euro symbol.
It looks like the euro sign because you can't see the curvature on the right.
I am feeling so smart. I remember
Can you explain what that means?
stuff today.
Identify the times of the later two events, the tech stream events, the 3-point turn and the backing maneuver.
Yes, in combination with other data, we were able to determine that.
Did you test the power on, power off data?
Yes, we did.
Could we have number 32, please?
Yeah, but then he can't. Then he
Tell us
can't
what this is.
note local
Sure.
time.
So this is the first power on event after 12 o'clock on January 29th. That power event is happening at 12:36 up here in the top. And the vehicle is powered on and it's not powered off until 12:42:08.
Is there any power on, power off events in between those two times?
No, there's not.
And do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that whether or not the first power on event for that night, January 29, 2022, was 12:12?
Oh, so they're going to use that 42 to say, well, it must have been a mistake on the Wi-Fi that she was home at 12:36 because she doesn't turn the car off till 6 minutes later.
Wouldn't it make
But
more
wasn't she
sense for her to
sitting
be
in the car
sitting in the
texting him
driveway?
and yelling at him?
Yeah.
Pretty sure she was blowing up his phone, but
Yeah, and she didn't get out of there. I mean, I wouldn't get out of my warm car to even if I was in the garage, if I didn't have to, I'd delay that.
36 a.m.
Yes.
Your Honor.
I'll sustain it at this point.
Do you have an opinion as to the first power on event of that Lexus on January 29, 2022?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Sustained at this time.
When you studied the information from
Hey,
the
hey.
data, does this slide reflect the information that you studied?
Yes, it does.
Were you able to determine from your data study the time that was registered of when that Lexus was turned on for the first time on January 29, 2022?
Yes, I was.
How were you able to do that?
Sure. So through our exemplar testing and determining that those timestamps are accurate to when the vehicle was powered on, we are able to say that this power on event is the first power on event of January 29th after 12 a.m.
And based on your study of the exemplar and the data from the SD card, did you arrive at an opinion as to the time of the first power on event of that Lexus vehicle on January 29, 2022?
Yes, I did.
Is your opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, it is.
And what is your opinion?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'll see you inside.
Do we think the sidebar is for leading or that he's asking him to verify scientifically and he is not a scientist?
I think
I don't
it's
know.
because, can you just guess what it means?
Basically.
Because that's what he's asking him. Can you make a judgment based on? No, you can just read off the telemetrics and say, but did you notice that his other data, maybe it's not in the system, but that had GPS location underneath it. So does this defense have an expert to debunk this guy just cross? They have cross to debunk this guy, and then they have their own experts to testify. You can't bring an expert in to question an expert. You can bring an expert in later to give your interpretation.
See,
Mr.
looked
Burgess,
like
could
he
you
wanted to shank
explain for
him.
us how you can identify the power on event from the data that you discovered on that SD card that was left behind?
Sure. So through our exemplar testing, we can identify a power on event, which is depicting the time the logo on the infotainment system comes on, and then the time the infotainment system goes blank. So that is representing a power off event. And And then we can reference that back to the ignition on, which occurs approximately 3 seconds before the power on, the infotainment power on event.
Is this a methodology that is used in your standard of practice?
Yes, it is.
And have you used this type of methodology before?
Yes, I have.
Is it a methodology that is regularly accepted in this type of analysis?
Yes, so this is a methodology that is regularly accepted in the digital forensics community. And it is a process of testing and then validating.
How does that process further validate the accuracy of the times that you are registering and finding?
Sure. So through that testing, we are able to validate that accuracy. And through that testing, we've got 4 tests that represent a power on event and 2 tests that represent a power off event. In addition to that, we are comparing that data to surveillance video with timestamps as well to show the consistency.
When you engaged in your testing, you said there was 4 test runs or examples. Did you analyze it to see how, in fact, accurate it was?
Yes, I did.
And how accurate was it?
It was accurate to the second compared to our reference clock.
And when you actually take the data from that SD card, how do you interpret it? How do you get it from a piece of plastic with metal on it to actual numbers and data?
Sure. So the process of that, again, is we're making connection to those technological pads on the SD card, and we're pulling that raw data. Once we have that raw data, there's a few processes we have to go through to make that raw data interpretable. So those processes are what's called XOR scrambling. So when data is stored on an SD card, there are 2 components to the SD card. There is what's called the NAND component, and then there's a controller component. The controller component.
Why is he looking like he's out running? Even his little tuft is getting visceral. It's getting fluffied. He looks like he's been out running. His cheeks are red, and
he probably went outside.
Like,
it's really windy and cold today.
He looks like Painter when the troops closing in. I don't know if this is a good or bad thing. I don't know who Painter is.
The Austrian painter.
Oh, that Painter.
That painter.
Oh, the tuft of anxiety is getting destroyed.
He probably went outside and was just blowing around everywhere.
But
a
it's
little tuft that could.
He looks like he's visibly. I can't say that word now. He looks
visibly,
visibly, yeah. That his
things are sweaty.
In a lot of discomfort.
He ate mom's spaghetti, but he knows he can't lose now. He's gonna spit some bars. In fact,
I just, it's weird how he looks.
Is where that
I said that when he got on the
that Command
stand.
42 lock is located in that controller component. So what we're doing is we're bypassing that controller.
Yes.
We're accessing that NAND, and then we're using forensic software to determine and interpret the XOR scrambling that is put in place on that NAND, so that we can take that scrambled data and be able to read it and interpret it, as well as what's called error correction code. So NAND devices are not, they're not great at keeping voltages accurate like they should, and that's just based on how the architecture and how the NAND components are manufactured. So what the manufacturers have done is they've put in place error correction code to correct any bit errors within that data. So what we've done is we've identified the error correction code and the XOR scrambling using software known as Resolute. That software, again, is hardware and software that we use to access that data and process it and interpret it. From there, we can take that data and we can review it in that hexadecimal format.
And based on that methodology and that process and that study, were you able to extract the data from the SD card and identify the first power on event of the defense?
I can't with this look. This is direct. This is the best you're going to get today. If you're this worked up just giving your testimony. Wait till Alessi, the silent killer, gets up there and says, so a little bit about your educational background. I have been looking at your CV. It says that you are a digital forensic examiner, but in another one it says digital examiner forensic. Why did you change your title? You were listed that you left school in 2018, but you also listed that you have an ongoing education. What is your master's?
Defendant's Lexus on January 29th, 2022 to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
Yes, I was.
And do you have an opinion about what time that Lexus, the defendant's Lexus, was powered on December 29th, 2022 for the first time?
Yes, that would be approximately 12:36.
Is that to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, it is.
On your chalk on the,
Certain,
on the
but
screen,
approximately.
is the power out event, is that the same as your interpretation?
Yes, it is.
The 12:36 a.m. time, what time clock is that based on?
Sure. So that's based on the internal clock in the Lexus.
Yeah,
The
stop saying
clock
sure.
in the Lexus, is that a universal time, or do clocks on different devices run differently?
Sure. So it's not a universal time. Clocks on different devices run differently. So if you've ever noticed that your microwave clock is not running in sync with your iPhone, the same thing is occurring here. Even though the Lexus clock.
No.
I put in the time on my microwave. Well, I don't have a clock on my mic, but I put in the time on that when I had a clock on it. That's not a Wi-Fi. This one
That's not
is
even close
Wi-Fi.
to the same thing.
It's what? Does the Lexus have a Wi-Fi or a GPS module that's connected? It's connected to satellites. It's not like out in my Opel. I'll put in the clock manually because it's from 2014. This is a 2021 Lexus, top of the line with all the trimmings. Oh, so now she put in the internal clock wrong because that's
Your car is an Opel?
yeah, it's called a Vauxhall in Britain.
Oh. I like
It's a
Opel
German
better.
car.
There's a lot of Opels in
is
Iraq.
communicating back and forth with GPS satellites and other things. The clock is still not synchronized perfectly. So you would not expect this clock to match up perfect with other devices.
When you're considering two very different or separate devices, if the time is different, what would that be called?
Sure. So that would be called what's called a clock variance.
I want to get into that later, but I want to finish what we have in front of us now.
Sure.
In addition to identifying the first power on event of January 29, 2022 of the defendant's Lexus at 12:36, were you able to identify the first
He's way too
power
much
off
hair,
event
Valhalla.
of that same Lexus of January 29, 2022?
Kind of reminds me of
Yes,
the
I
face,
was.
though.
And that was at 12:42:08
no
approximately.
way.
Did you use the same methodology and vetting that you did and testing that you did with the power on event?
Yes, I did.
And do you have an opinion if that time is accurate to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, I do.
And what is that opinion?
So that opinion is that time is reliable to the second as far as the Lexus clock is concerned.
What is the graph on the bottom showing us?
Sure. So the graph is just a graphical representation of the same data representing the power on event on a timeline at 12:36 and the power off event at approximately 12:42:08.
When you're looking at times, power on and power off events to date and time it, are you obtaining that information independent of other outside information?
Yes, I am.
Is the data simply the data, or does something affect it?
Sure. So no, the data is simply the data. So when we get the data, we can compare it to outside sources or external sources to verify that it's consistent with other sources. But the data does not depend on any outside sources.
Do you oftentimes use outside?
Again, if it's UTC, that would mean that it's not. If you're looking at the clock in the dashboard, you would have that for Eastern Standard Time. But the internals in the car will run UTC like every other computer component does. Every one of our computers will say we are somewhere compared to UTC. And then locally, it'll change it So what's the time drift, and how does the time internally? There must be a clock that runs everything, and then of course I can change on the dial because it's UTC. I think it seems a lot like oh shoot, something doesn't add up. We better make up a story.
Yeah, it just
Sources to
none of this
vet or test the
has he explained in a way that the jury can consume.
No.
Again, you can say a lot because Dr. Wolf is cute, but he also broke down information in a way that was easy to digest.
Yes.
He and Brennan have been talking for, I think, an eternity now, and none of this has really made sense other than I played with a test car and from that extrapolated, I could assume what was going on in Karen's car.
Can someone remember when we hear Karen walking across the floor in the parking garage at John's house? Is it 12:38 or something? I just remember we do have a time where we know she must have been home. So does that line up when the car was shut off?
data, even though it's
Yeah,
totally separate
I thought
concept?
it was like
Yes, I did.
41 or something like that.
After this
Yeah,
power on,
it
power off
doesn't-
event, when you studied the data from the SD card using the same methodology and technique, did you find any other subsequent power on and power off events for the defendant's Lexus on January 29, 2022 after this event?
Yes, I did.
Can we have slide 33, please? Mr. Burgess, can you tell us what the next event is that you found in the data?
Sure. So the next power on event occurs at 5:07:46. That's this top timestamp here. The infotainment system records a power off event after that at 5:46:20. And what we have here is we've got surveillance video that was provided that depicts the approximate time range that those two events happen. So these videos do not capture the actual power on or power off event, but they occur around the same time frame and they are consistent with one another.
The power on event time that you've listed as 5:07:46, where does that time come from?
So that time is coming from the internal Lexus clock.
And based on the data from the Lexus clock, do you have an opinion as to the accuracy of that time of 5:07:46 a.m. as it relates to the Lexus clock?
Yes, I do.
And what's your opinion?
So compared to the Lexus clock, that time is accurate to the second.
The videos you have, are those timed from the same Lexus clock or a different source?
No, so those timestamps of the videos are coming from external sources. In the example of these videos, I believe that is a Ring camera.
Why would you try to vet the timestamp that you've identified to the second from the Lexus clock with another item, including a video that uses a different clock?
Sure. So that further validates that those timestamps are accurate and they're consistent with timestamps we're seeing from other devices.
Can there be a variance with other devices?
There can be a variance.
If there's a variance, could that still corroborate or support the original timestamp from the Lexus clock?
Yes. So even with a variance, those timestamps can still be consistent with one another.
And on the two photographs, are those videos or photographs?
Those are videos.
What is the purpose of including a video?
Sure. So the purpose of including the video is just to depict that the video does not actually capture the power on or power off event. But again, it is around the same time frame that the power on and power off
Does the
event
black
occurred.
box
Ms. Gilman, are you
pick
able
up
to
that
play
she
the
hits
video
the
to the
car?
left?
Oh,
Thank
intact tail light.
What about that video vets or corroborates the 5:07:46 Lexus time on the power on event?
Objection, Your Honor.
A little bit more before you get to that, Mr.
Okay. Did you use the video that we just saw in an attempt to vet or corroborate the timestamp for the power on event on the Lexus?
Yes, I did.
How did you do that?
Sure. So looking at the start timestamp on the video, we can see that the video starts at approximately 5:07:58. Keeping in mind this timestamp is coming from the camera or the Ring video, the Ring camera itself. And when we look at the power on event, we see that it occurs at 5:07:46. So although we don't see the actual time of the power on event, that is consistent with what we would expect.
What does the video on the right help us do?
So video on the right helps us do the same thing. So when we look at the power off event that occurs at 5:46:20, again, when we look at the ring video on the right, that start timestamp of that video is 5:46:29. So again, we missed the power off portion of when that occurs, but that is consistent, again, with what we would expect.
Could we play the video on the right? If you can enlarge, that'd be helpful. If not,
I love when she stopped and showed him.
Yeah.
Or showed them the car. Karen, both Jen and Carrie
Stop the
remember
video,
that clearly.
Mr. Burgess, you see the lights are on that vehicle?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell if the vehicle is on or off at that point?
Sure. So I cannot tell if the vehicle is on or off at that point. Typically, when you power off a Lexus or a modern vehicle, the lights will stay on for some portion of time afterwards. But again, that is consistent with the timestamp from the power off event.
And do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty as to the accuracy of the power on and power off events as they pertain to the Lexus clock?
Yes, I do.
And what is that opinion?
And that is that those timestamps are accurate to the second.
Did you further follow the data to see if there was any other power on, power off events relative to the Lexus for January 29, 2022?
Yes, I did.
Could you take us to Exhibit 34, please? What is this, Mr. Burgess?
Sure. So this is the next time that the vehicle is powered on and subsequently powered off. That power on event occurs at 12:35:01. The power off event occurs at 2:12:01. And then this video is a video from alarm.com surveillance that depicts the vehicle pulling into a driveway and shutting off. So when we look at the video and we watch the video, you can actually see at 2:12:01 in the video timestamp that the windshield wipers stop moving and the vehicle's suspension begins to lower, indicating that the ignition button has been pressed.
Let's start with the power on event. Was there?
I don't know. He's from Texas. He should be used to heat.
He's in
Any
Massachusetts. It's not that hot.
No.
No.
By the way,
No, it's
Valhalla,
really cold today, actually.
when you look back, did you notice if there was any dates with the time? You have the timestamp, but did we have dates? Because can he claim that the data is from the date? I didn't notice that.
On the
to
hex
show power
decimal
on event at
stuff, yeah,
12:35:01.
there was a
There
date
is
on
no
it.
video
There was a date,
available that I'm
okay.
aware of.
On the last slide, you had the power
Maybe it's
off
the next
event
slide.
at 5:46:20 a.m.
Correct.
Was there any other power on, power off events between 5:46:20 a.m. and this event here?
No, there was not.
Did you try to obtain any collateral
same
or
thing.
cooperative video or evidence relative to the power on event at 12:35:01?
I did request
you, Lige.
or make a
Yeah.
request to see if there was any video available. And as far as I'm aware, there was not.
Regarding the power on event, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty as to the accuracy of the power on event as it relates to the Lexus clock on the system?
Yes, I do.
And what is that opinion?
That is that power on event is accurate to the second in reference to the Lexus clock.
12:35:01 p.m.?
Correct.
And
So
do you
what
have an
clock
opinion as to the
isn't
power off event to a
accurate?
reasonable degree of scientific certainty as to the accuracy from the data you recovered from the SD card?
Yes, I do. And that power off event again occurred at approximately 2:12:01, according to the Lexus clock.
I don't know if you can enlarge the video, Ms. Gilman, but if you can, and if not, can you play anyways?
I believe the one that's off is John's cell phone data.
Yeah, but cell phone can't be off. It runs on internet time.
That's what he was saying.
Yeah, but it's still internet time.
Weird. The headlights shut off there.
Yeah. Well, it's only sometimes modern vehicles let their headlights stay on. I don't know. There could be a sensor saying it's light out, so you don't need.
And could you explain for us the graph on the bottom of that exhibit, or
Sure.
pardon me, of that diagram?
Sure. So that graph again is just a timeline graphical representation of when that power off event occurred, and when the power on event occurred, and when the power off event occurred at 12:35:01 and 2:12:01.
Based on the data you analyzed from the SD card, was there any further power on and power off events on January 29, 2020?
So it took her 2 hours to drive 45 minutes to her parents' house.
Is that what he said?
Yes, at 12 something to 2 something. I'm pretty sure that it took her at least 90 minutes to drive 45 minutes.
Into after this 12:35:01 to 2:12:01 event.
Yes, there was.
Could you display for us
Hour
page 35,
40.
Ms. Gilman?
12:45 till 12:12. 12:35 to 2:12. Funny they don't use. Oh, it doesn't matter. So that's 1 hour and 40 minutes to drive 45 minutes to her parents in Dedham. A trip that Proctor will later make with a tow truck the other way in an hour. Less than an hour.
That's a valid point, Short Life Creations. The car was running doesn't mean she was necessarily traveling the whole time.
No, but again, if you go, we're going to your house to pick up some stuff. Wouldn't you shut it off if you go inside for half an hour?
You would think you would.
Yeah, in
Not
Denmark, it's
necessarily.
illegal to leave your car running because that makes it it makes it tempting to steal. So yeah, I know she isn't the one driving. I was just saying the car was traveling for an hour and 40 minutes to do what a tow truck will later do in less than an hour.
And what is this, Mr. Burgess?
Sure. So this is the next power on event that is recorded within the system. And that power on event occurs approximately 4:11:46, and the power off event occurs at
It didn't take that long.
4:12:56. The video
It's
we
because
see
they
is
put
that
it wrong
same
in the
alarm.com
report.
surveillance video. The start timestamp of that video is 4:12:03. So again, we don't see the actual power on and off event within the video, but it is consistent with what we would expect
It goes on the tow truck at 4:12, and it's back at the garage at 5:30. Yeah, so it takes an hour and 20 minutes.
power on
I
event
might be
occurring
wrong.
at 4:11:46.
This is a tow truck.
And then the video starting,
And it's
we
snowing
see the
more
car backing
now.
up at 4:12:03.
Would the alarm.com be using a different clock than that of the Lexus?
It would be, yes.
But based on your methodology in vetting and testing,
Yes, because if they steal your car, you are the fault. And when you then go cry to your insurance company, it's because you're dumb.
in view of
Oh,
the data on the SD
communism.
card, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree?
No, it's
of scientific
common sense
certainty as
because
to the time
you
of
will
this
then
power on
say,
event?
I didn't
Yes, so
do
that power
anything
on event
wrong.
would be 4:11:46.
Well, if you keep
And do you
your
have an
front door
opinion as
open and
to
says,
the
I
time
have
of the
money
power off
inside,
event related to this diagram?
Yes, that would be
you won't
4:12:56.
get
Is that
anything
opinion as
from
well
that.
to reasonably
That
assign
sounds a
certainty?
lot like
Yes, it is.
victim blaming, sir.
Is that a photograph or a video?
No,
That
it
is also
sounds
a
like
video.
preventing
Could you help us?
stupidity.
Why is that illegal?
Because-
if I want to hold on, let's address this for a second. Whether or not my car is running has nothing to do with somebody else stealing my car.
It absolutely does, because it's the same as leaving a pile of cash in your garage with the garage door open and sitting inside with your shotgun and killing them, because you are tempting.
Why is that wrong?
Because
Also
you are
not
tempting them
wrong.
to commit a crime.
If somebody breaks into my house to steal,
No,
my
I said
God,
leave your garage door open.
Thank you.
who cares if
It's
the
way
garage
different.
door is
Graph,
open? It's my
give a general
garage.
idea
You
of the
can't
time.
just come
Yeah, so
into my
similarly, the graph
garage.
is timeline representation
Yeah,
of the
that
power
seems
on.
like asking
Victim
for a,
blaming.
No, it's actually
blaming.
illegal if you try and entice people to come in and because you leave out loot.
Well, that's not the same thing as leaving
Well,
your car
yeah.
running.
It is,
in a
because it's really
snowstorm.
I'm not
easy
going
to
to leave
steal
my
if it's
pirate
running.
treasure out front.
That's the silliest thing I've ever. Leaving a car running in your driveway is enticing theft. That's the stupidest law I've heard today. And we're here for the Karen Reed trial.
You cannot tell me that a straight man would not show the actual road conditions instead of untreated driveways 100% of the time. Hey. Yeah,
Exactly, Volstorm.
it's really easy to believe that, oh, we can't do this. Or we can't drive that fast because the road looks like 4 feet of snow. No, they have been prepared and plowed all day long. Kind of like your mom.
Mr. Burgess, was there an additional power on, power off
That
event
was an easy setup.
after the power off event at 4:12:56 p.m. at the Dighton residence?
Yes, there was.
Ms. Gilman, could you show us number 36, please?
Are mini skirts illegal as well?
Mr. Burgess, could you take us through this one?
Sure. So this is
No, it won't.
the next
It'll
power
shut
off
up
or power on event
shut
that
off
occurs.
when they
And
shut
that
the
power
car
on
off.
event occurs
If you
at
don't have one of those
5:34:51
fobs where
p.m.
you need it in the
The
car.
power off event occurs at 5:36:42. Again, the video that is associated with this does not show the
Why
power
did it
on
take
or the
them
power off
almost
event,
5 minutes to get
but
the
it
car
shows
in?
the time just before the vehicle is arriving to this location on a tow truck. and that would be consistent
All you
with the vehicle
Yanks.
then being powered off and
Yeah,
back
but that's
off
for
of the
like
tow truck at that time.
environmental reasons, right?
And based on your analysis of the data, do you have an opinion to a
Ozone
reasonable
layer.
degree of scientific certainty the time this power on event took place?
Yes, and that time would be 5:34:51.
And that's according to the internal Lexus clock?
Yes, it is.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty when this vehicle was then powered off?
Yes, and that would be 5:36:42.
Again, pursuant to the
You know what
Lexus
they
clock.
should do,
Correct.
Baker? Instead of making it illegal to have
After
your
this
car
event at
running,
5:34
they should make it illegal to
1
steal
p.m.
cars.
5:36:42 p.m.
That's what they should do.
When you studied the data, were there any other power on or power off
Sounds a
events
lot like
for
victim
this Lexus
blaming
vehicle
for
on
people
January
who are
29,
hit by
2022?
social
Not that I
economic
studied after this
problems.
either.
At least my mom can try and resist the plowings. Good point.
Good Lord.
Could you take that down, please?
Just do like I do. Leave a pit bull in your car if you leave it
Now, we
running.
touched on an issue earlier. I want you to
True.
give your
Problem
opinions
solved.
and explain to the jury. You mentioned the word variance between different items. I don't think you used the word items. You said something else.
Sure. So that's going to be the clock variance between different devices. So in this instance, what we're referring to is the difference in the clocks of the Lexus module and an iPhone. So we would not expect those clocks to be perfectly synced. Typically, what we see and is what is generally accepted is a clock variance of up to 60 seconds. And that is because when you think about when you're looking at your radio and you're looking at the clock, it's representing to you the hours and the minutes. It's not representing the seconds. So again, it's accurate. Its function is to be accurate to the minute, but its function is not to be accurate to the second.
Is a variance between different devices an accepted concept in your community?
Yes, it is an accepted concept in my community.
When you were looking for power on, power off information from the data on the SD card, what clock would that information, that time be dependent on?
Sure. So that's going to be dependent on the Lexus clock. That Lexus clock is continuously running, but it also syncs up with GPS systems to update the clock on occasion. We do not know how frequent that activity occurs because that is proprietary to the manufacturer themselves.
To bring us back,
Did you contact the manufacturer and ask?
Correct. There were two text stream events.
Remind us what those were.
Sure. So one is
Her brother or father drove her there, yes.
going to be associated with a three-point turn, and the other is going to be associated with a backing maneuver.
In those two text stream events, are they related in any way to the running clock that is on the text stream data?
Sure. So when we think back, the text stream events have that running clock from ignition on, and because we know the power on events from the infotainment module, we can reconcile when those time counts occurred.
If there's information about timing from text stream data on the Lexus, what would you have to do if you took a separate device like an iPhone and you wanted to reconcile the variance?
Sure. So if we want to reconcile the variance, what we would need is we would need an event that occurs that both clocks record. So for instance, if you've got two cameras that...
Nope. That doesn't make sense. He just said that the difference between the Lexus clock and the one on your radio could be 1 minute apart because it's not doing seconds. But you're not measuring against the radio clock and the phone. You're measuring against the Lexus and the phone. The Lexus and the phone is doing the exact same thing. It goes to the satellites or the internet and says, what time is it? Both of them have the exact same way of keeping time. And both of them will keep more than the minutes. I agree, the time I put into my radio, which is always 3 minutes, so I'll always be early to every appointment. But if you're taking the Lexus clock and the iPhone clock, they should be showing exactly the same time because both of them are running off UTC. Because both of them are digital clocks. That's internal. It has nothing to do with what's displayed on my screen. My screen only on my phone shows me hours and minutes, but the phone doesn't stop counting the microseconds behind because it's just a computer that asks the internet, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it?
Yeah, this is, again, I would think if they're both satellite dependent, I'm not smart, but I would think if they're both going to a satellite, they would have similar times.
Yeah, again, we locked the airbook deploy. There's somewhere within a minute. That's not It wasn't captured on Ring. It was captured on her phone. She left a voice message. That's. Am I totally wrong? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just waiting for Alessi to explain it to me.
Yeah.
A recording, you jumping up and down, you would take your motion of jumping up and down, or your event of jumping up and down, and you would use that event to sync the clocks of those two cameras. So essentially, we're doing the same thing with the Lexus clock and the iPhone clock.
When you did your analysis during this case, initially, did you have any interest in trying to reconcile those clocks?
No, I did not.
Why not?
Because that is generally accepted that the clock variance is up to 60 seconds. And while reviewing the power on and off events and comparing that to the surveillance videos that were provided, that was consistent with what we would have expected.
Did something compel you to further your study and compare the Lexus clock information on those two tech stream events, the 3-point turn and the backing maneuver, to a different device?
Yes, there was a claim of attempting to synchronize those two clocks that I believe was potentially misleading.
So based on reviewing that information and coming to that conclusion, did you on your own do any further study about the difference in clocks and attempt to synchronize them?
Yes, I did.
You said that you can synchronize if you have more than one device identifying a particular time. What do you mean by that?
Sure. So if we've got two devices that are recording a similar event, so let's say, for instance, a 3-point turn, if that is recorded with an iPhone, with the iPhone's clock, we can compare that event to the time that that event occurs and is recorded by the Lexus.
Were you aware of any device other than the Lexus recording that 3-point turn?
Yes, I was.
What were you aware of?
That would be an iPhone from Mr. O'Keefe.
Did you have data and information from Mr. O'Keefe?
How did the iPhone register a 3-point turn?
Is this going back to Waze?
off the
Are we bringing
GPS,
Waze in
right?
here? Is that why he had to look at Mr. Whiffin's report?
What?
Waze had a lot to do with the GPS stuff. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, but again, for those of you who weren't here when we did the Waze stuff, it runs off the iPhone's clock. The phone and the car should be at almost synchronous. There's no 60-second drift on those two things.
Phone some time ago?
I did have partial location data from Mr. O'Keefe's iPhone.
Partial.
Did you do something with his iPhone data as it relates to the Lexus clock on those two events, the 3-point turn and the backing maneuver?
I did on the 3-point turn, yes, and the backing maneuver.
Tell us what you did.
Sure. So I looked at when the 3-point turn occurred within the iPhone data and the location data in reference to that clock. And then
The
looked
new
at the
data guide, phone data.
same 3-point turn event as it was recorded from the tech stream and the Lexus clock.
At some point, did you have enough data to make that full analysis?
Yes, I did.
Now, as a general concept, before we get to the 3-point turn in detail, I want to turn to page 39 of the PowerPoint.
But again, your GPS coordinates wouldn't pick up a 3-point turn, because that's not how GPS works. And we saw the GPS effed up. We saw the Waze data. It had him because they were already preparing, because again, they just put you on a grid of roads that they have on a map. So they had them doing a left turn before they went up the road and did the 3-point turn and went back. It's not, I can't wait to cross.
I'm sorry, if you could turn to page 38, please. Okay. Can you explain to us the concept of synchronizing clocks?
Sure. So this is kind of a graphical representation of how to synchronize a clock. So essentially, like I said, we're taking a event that occurs. In this instance, it's a 3-point turn. We have data where that 3-point turn is recorded within an iPhone, and we have data where that 3-point turn is recorded within the Lexus. Those events have clocks associated with them. So
yeah, every time I travel, I will get, you have arrived here. My phone kind of knows where I am because it checks the time all the time. So I could understand if they were saying the dashboard clock and the phone was out of sync. But the Lexus and the iPhone is running off the two same systems. That I don't understand it.
in order to reconcile the difference in those clocks, we are comparing the clock times for the event from each device and moving or adjusting the clock for one compared to the other.
In addition to specializing in data and computers and cars, you also mentioned that you specialize in mobile phones?
Yes, I do.
Did you use your experience in your training and your education to analyze the iPhone data from Mr. O'Keefe's phone as it related to the information from the Lexus vehicle?
Objection, Your Honor. Can you answer that, yes or no?
Yes.
Just one second.
Yes.
You did?
I did.
Okay. Did you see what type of information was being stored on Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone as far as location data?
Yes, I did. In reference to location data, Mr. O'Keefe's iPhone is recording timestamps, GPS position, speed, and heading. So heading is going to be the direction that the iPhone is facing.
Was there any particular application that you were aware of that he was using?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, he was using the Waze app for navigation.
Could we have number 39, please? Could you tell us what this shows, Mr. Burgess?
Sure. So specifically, what we're looking at within the location data is a 2-minute window. So that 2-minute window we see here graphically plotted on a map. And we see, it's hard to tell, but you can see a white dot, which is the center of a radius for a GPS position. The orange circles are the horizontal accuracy for each one of those positions. And then down here, you can see a black line that is coming off of each GPS position that represents the heading or the direction that the iPhone is facing.
You mentioned you had some materials from Mr. Whiffen. Did you ever see any materials from Mr. Whiffen regarding location data that was acquired through the application Waze?
Yes, I did see a report by Mr. Whiffen.
Did you rely on his report, or did you independently, on your own, test the location information?
Sure. So I independently, on my own, looked at the location data from Mr. O'Keefe's phone.
This is the biggest possible thing, because this is when they will say the impact occurred. So he better be right. I'm sorry, but it would appear that all this man specialized is timing the time to come. No.
Diagram that we see with all the points on it. Is this developed from your own independent view and review of Mr. O'Keefe's location data?
It is.
To the top left is a round circle. What does that indicate?
Sure. So top left. So yeah, so that's going to be, again, the GPS coordinates beginning for this 2-minute interval that we're looking at. The orange circle is going to be the horizontal accuracy for that GPS
sequestration and knows what's coming.
To the left, there seems to be a bigger circle on the top.
Sure. So as we come down, I believe what is Cedar Crest and go up Cedar Crest, we have a position where the course heading of the iPhone changes, the speed lowers, and we have a lot more GPS points in a centralized location. So that's why you see that overlapping circles in that location.
When you're following and analyzing Mr. O'Keefe's location information, does this in any way relate to the first of those two text stream events that you originally were focused on?
It does relate to the first text stream event, which identifies a 3-point turn.
And again, although you're not an accident reconstructionist, do you know if there's data that was captured regarding this 3-point turn as far as an event?
Yes, I'm aware of data that was captured during that 3-point turn event.
If we could turn to page 40, please. I want you to explain to us how this chart works. What does a point mean?
Sure. So when we were initially provided the location data, again, we were provided a partial view or a partial data set of that location data. And within that Excel spreadsheet that data was provided in, it was identified as GPS points. So what we've got here is we've got the partial data along with the full data set that I was provided later on. So we've got a couple columns here. So we've got point, which is GPS point from that partial initial data set that I was provided. We've got timestamps. So these timestamps are every second. With every second, there is a latitude and a longitude recorded, as well as a horizontal accuracy, a speed, and again, a course heading.
When you look at data point 154, is there a time ascribed to that?
There is a time described to that as 12:23:58.
Before you did this more in-depth analysis, were you relying on anything beyond point 154, that one line?
No, so that was the only thing that was being relied on at that time.
Why?
Because again, we were initially provided a partial data set of the location.
And why didn't you seek earlier on to break this down with more specificity?
Again, because the generally accepted clock variance is up to 60 seconds, and that data was consistent with everything else we were seeing, so there was no need to look any further.
And what compelled you again to look further?
A claim of misinterpreting and a misleading calculation trying to adjust these clocks.
Were you given a report?
I was not given a report. I was giving a PowerPoint presentation.
When you decided to delve deeper into this, was that on your own initiative or were you requested to do it?
That was on my own initiative.
Bull crap. No one works for free.
Now, rather than relying on point 154, what does breaking it down with all of the times and numbers between the green and orange do for your analysis?
Sure. So breaking it down,
it was the one we talked about with the GPS guy that it's not very accurate.
Honest to God, yesterday I by hand collected rocks out of my yard to make gravel, right? I gathered probably 10 buckets of gravel by hand yesterday, and I didn't sweat nearly this much.
No, I can't. I feel sorry for him. As a fellow chubster who sweats a lot, I feel sorry. But I don't.
He's not that chubby. I mean, he is, but he's not that chubby.
No, I'm chubster.
The
Aurora,
witness
and I
stand
don't
makes
sweat
him
as
look
much.
huge because the witness stand is teeny tiny.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to see the text and emails just like the ARCA ones.
You can see
Yep.
between the green. So the green highlighted in green is position or timestamp 12:23:59. What we see happening before that time is the speed is pretty consistent between 15 and 8 miles per hour. The speed starts to drop at that point. And if we look at the course heading, we can see that the course heading before that time is pretty consistent as well, between 339 and 348. So that is, at position.
He read the ARCA report.
Or at time 12:23:59, the speed drops and the course heading changes from approximately 360, so straight north, to 284, which is in a northwesternly direction. After that time of 12:23:59, the speed recorded is 0. The course heading is 352. And at time 12:24:07, you see the speed pick back up, and the course heading is around 179 degrees. So that's going to be in a southern direction. So based on this information, we can tell that the vehicle.
It's like watching the love child of IRS and the big boss man. They could start sweating just standing still. I bet you he has pit stains down to his elbows.
Between 12:23:59 and 12:24:07, made a 3-point turn maneuver.
No, they didn't.
Changing from the northern direction of heading to the southern direction.
Is this data generated from Mr. O'Keefe's phone or from the Lexus?
Sure. So this data is generated from Mr. O'Keefe's phone.
Where you initially relied on 154 as a timestamp to identify the time and location of the car at a later point, does this give you more of a benefit breaking it down?
This does give you more of a benefit breaking it down.
The zeros and the speed, what does that indicate to you as far as the data relative to the portion of the 3-point turn?
Sure. So it doesn't necessarily mean the vehicle is at 0 miles per hour. Again, if you look at the horizontal accuracies, we've got anywhere between 16 and 29 feet. So that's the range in the GPS and what it's seeing. So if the car is slightly moving or moving like you would expect during a 3-point turn, you would expect to see that speed at 0 miles per hour.
Did you develop a photograph with some detail to explain this in more of a picture format?
Yes, I did make a graphical representation of this.
If we could have 41, please. Could you break this down for us, Mr. Burgess?
Sure. So this is, again, a zoomed in version of the map that we showed earlier. And what we've done is we've cleaned out or just removed, for the sake of simplicity, the other points leading north to this point and the points leading south. Those are going to be those 0 mile per hour indications. So what we're looking at is the heading change and that speed change, which occurs at 12:23:59. And you can see the heading change from the black arrow leading off of the center radius of the GPS position. Then at 12:24:07, you see the heading change to a southern direction. And then the other GPS points are consistent with the vehicle moving southbound on Cedar Crest.
So the claim that you analyzed, did that actually compel you to analyze and identify a more accurate variance than you originally had?
It did.
And do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty what the variance is between the clock on the defendant's Lexus on January 29, 2022 and Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone on January 29, 2022?
Yes, I do.
And to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, what is that variance?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Don't you dare besmirch the good name of Irvin R. Shyster. You tax
Irwin
cheats.
R. Shyster.
After you studied timestamp 154, what did that help you do? What did you learn from that?
Sure. So after studying timestamp GPS point 154 and these further GPS positions, we're able to identify the approximate time that the 3-point turn occurred according to Mr. O'Keefe's iPhone data. So now we've got that event of when that 3-point turn occurred. Now we can compare that to the 3-point turn from the text stream data and that running clock. Again, what we're doing is taking the power on event at 12:12:36 and adding the time count from the text stream data to come up with the time of 12:23:38 in the text stream data. So the text stream data indicates a 3-point turn ended or a trigger event, a text stream event ended at approximately 12:23:38. The iPhone indicates that a 3-point turn occurred between 12:23:59 and 12:24:07. So since we've got that shared event between the two devices, we can reconcile any type of clock variance. So adjusting the Lexus clock to the iPhone clock, we can calculate that clock variance.
Is this a methodology that is commonly used in your practice?
It is.
Is it commonly used in the scientific community which you're part of?
It is.
Are there scholarly papers about this type of methodology in comparison of synchronizing clocks?
There are.
One of the papers you wrote Did that have anything to do with synchronization of clocks?
It did not have anything to do with
He wrote the
synchronization of clocks,
scholarly paper.
but it had
yeah.
it was relative to how
No, he
accurate
didn't
the
read
timestamps are of
write
events from
anything
iPhones.
about it.
And that was one of your peer-reviewed papers?
Yes, it was.
And are there scholarly journals and studies on the synchronization of clocks?
There are, yes.
Did you use that methodology in your analysis to come to arrive at an opinion about the time variance between the defendant's Lexus and Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, I do.
And what is that opinion?
The clock variance is between 21 and 29 seconds.
If we could have number 42, please. What is this, Mr. Burgess?
Sure. So this is, if we think back to the last slide, we've identified the 3-point turn event in both the data sets. So now if we want to adjust one clock to the other, we can do that. And doing that, we've identified that the variance is between 21 and 29 seconds. So we would need to adjust the Lexus clock forward by 21 to 29 seconds to synchronize.
The variance can't be 21 to 29 seconds. The variance is one set. It's either 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, or 29, or you have already based your theory on bunk data, because you are now saying that within those 21 to 29 seconds, there's a discrepancy of 8 seconds. That's a discrepancy of, do the math quick, Valhalla. That's like 40% discrepancy.
Give or take.
So
20, 30, almost 30.
Your discrepancy is something that would it itself have a 30 to 40% inaccuracy.
Yeah.
What?
This
So
is
if
when
I
we-
understand, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's approximate exactness. It doesn't make sense. We agreed on the English language. You can't have approximate exactness. It's just it. Mr. Mo is mowing. Sorry.
Yeah, when I put that in my math test, they didn't accept it. Somewhere between 1 and a million.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, he's adjusting the clock on or on the Lexus through John's phone that was also through the Waves app.
Yes.
Yes.
So he's not actually adjusting it off of John's phone. He's adjusting it off of the Waves app itself, which works on a delay.
Monotronic clock or whatever the hell that thing was that we learned about, the monatomic clock.
But it works on a delay itself, right? Because you can't plot a GPS point until after you get there,
Dear
or
Lord,
whatever the
this is
case. So, like, how is this?
And
I don't understand how we got here.
I'm also a little bit because GPS isn't accurate because it'll try and predict. That's why it made a turn. So is it an exact reading, or is it because your GPS, kind of like we talked about when we saw the guy talk about the GPS stuff, that it'll try and figure out where you're going. So instead of following your route with the inaccuracies in GPS, which would be all over the place, kind of showing you driving like this, a GPS would say, okay, there's a road here. So even though your points are like this, we put it into the grid and say you're traveling down this road. So GPS isn't it's not like a real GPS, because they don't. Well,
Is it with the iPhone data? So in doing that, the end of text stream event 1162.1 goes from 12:23:38 to 12:23 between 12:23:59 and 12:24:07.
These two clocks, one on the left being the Lexus clock that reads 12:23:38 a.m., and the other clock on Mr. O'Keefe's iPhone has a different time, 12:23:59 to 12:24:07. Do you have an opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, if these two clocks pertain to an event that's happening at the same time or a different time?
Yes. So these two clocks are, we are synchronizing these clocks to an event that is happening at the same time.
This is relative to the first text stream event, the 3-point turn. You said there was a second text stream event that you were
she
analyzing.
changed that as well.
Correct. There's a second text stream event.
And what is that second text stream event?
That second text stream event is a backing up maneuver.
Are you familiar with the time frame on the Lexus clock relative to that second text stream event?
Yes, I am.
And what is that time frame?
So it is approximately 19 minutes from the ignition on.
Do you know what time that is on the Lexus clock?
Yes, I do.
With the court's permission?
Yes.
So that is going to be 12:31:43 is going to be the end of that text stream event.
That text stream event, by the way, when it captures data, what window of data does it capture when there's a text stream event or a triggering event?
Sure. So when the trigger occurs, it captures data 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after the trigger.
What if the event is less than 10 seconds?
So if it's less than 10 seconds, it would capture the entire event. If it's more than 10 seconds, it would only capture a partial snapshot of that event.
And so when you talk about the data for the backing event, is that the 10-second window you're speaking of?
Yes, that is that 10-second window.
Does that have anything to do with defining the length of the actual event?
No, it does not.
When you looked at the time from the Lexus clock regarding that backing event, did you do an analysis of John O'Keefe's phone considering the variance that you identified?
Yes, I did. So I applied the same variance to that second text stream event.
When you apply that variance between the Lexus clock and Mr. O'Keefe's phone,
We know from the GPS guy that that's how GPS works. That it'll read different points, but it'll just put it on a road.
what is the, can I turn to 43, please? What is the time of that event if we're referring to Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
Sure. So the time of that event with the clock variance adjusted is 12:32:04 to between 12:32:04 and 12:32:12.
And do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty as to the accuracy of that time from Mr. O'Keefe's phone considering the variance?
Yes, I do.
And what is your opinion?
And the opinion is that the second text stream event ends between 12:32:04 and 12:32:12.
When you say text stream event, that's the 10-second window?
Correct. That's the 10-second window.
Does that necessarily include the entire event?
No, it does not.
The graph on the bottom, what does that show us? It looks a little bit overwritten.
Yeah. So that graph is a timeline representation of the text stream event ending, being adjusted with the 12:32:04 to 12:32:12 in comparison with the last lock event that is recorded by Mr. O'Keefe's phone at 12:32:09.
Your analysis relative to the data that you obtained from the SD card, is your analysis and opinions separate from the other information you looked at that corroborated or supported your analysis?
Yes, they are.
I have no further questions.
Oh, thank God. He's done.
So
That was
he
not
didn't
very
find- He didn't find any evidence of the car striking him in any of the data.
that wasn't very compelling. Anybody? Is that just me? Because it was just like, okay, what is?
But yeah, I know the action reconstructionist guy is the guy who's gonna come talk about the accident. But there was an event. Okay, fine. See you later. Bye.
Yeah.
All I see. This is all I see.
He was weirdly sweaty. Sue says she's wearing a sweater in court today, but everyone's different, like clocks.
Everybody's wearing a jacket.
It's super cold today.
Come on now. Objection, objection, objection.
Lights, please. That's as good as they can be, huh? With one burned out.
Calm down.
They have to go to a sidebar for the lights.
Did they say lunch? Court is on lunch break. Do we
Okay,
get a
good.
time?
'Cause I was like, let him start after lunch.
Sidebar. They changed it. Whoever's running
45
Portuguese
minutes.
nonsense. Struggling today.
Let's see, that's gross.
I thought this chip-off data was the end-all, be-all. Plevin had promised me this. So unless the next guy comes in and tells me where in the data you can see, because this guy was actually only there to say there's two clocks with approximately 20 to 30 seconds off. That's all he actually did. That seems really not important.
And he sort of tried to make it seem like we knew exactly when these keystrokes, these particular events happened. I still have some questions about, how her not turning off the car, but I could see if you were a little pissed and they're quiet, forgetting to turn off your car when you got home.
Yeah, but you can hear her walk across the
garage
floor in the garage at 12:30 something.
Well,
I
yeah,
thought it was
but could she have
40,
been yelling at John and
41.
forgot to turn off her car and then come back? I mean, that seems, especially since we have that.
No, because there's no car
voicemail.
running, and that's in the garage. So that would make no sense.
The spreadsheet's buried in all of Jamie's unable to find link chats.
Excuse me.
Everybody else
because
found it,
there
Jamie.
was two links there. That's I know that's really hard to figure out which one it could be.
Baker.
Here it is.
Yeah, I know, Jamie. You if you don't get it, do you need the one for afternoon sent to you as well?
Yeah, because I clicked. I clicked
Yes.
all 1, 2, 3.
I made it
think
wrong.
there's 3 of them up.
I know it's my mistake. The rest of us, only 75% of the people here had it working, so it must be us.
Yeah, it must be. It's never me. What are you talking about?
Big as 10-year-old manual. No, I don't. I have it. It's even older. No, but again, the car was turned off because we can hear her walk across the floor in the garage. We can hear her high heels walking across the floor. If the car was on, you would be able to hear that as well. So the car must have been turned on. And I believe it's 12:30 something that she arrives home. The funny thing is that's one of those Ring videos that's not there. Magically enough, it works at certain times. We know Karen haven't deleted any of the, because she hadn't the access to the Ring system. But we also know that she hooked up to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36. And on a good day, with a good router, with perfect conditions, an inside router reaches 50 to 60 feet, which would put her roughly out on the road in front of the house.
Yeah, because mine connects when I'm like just pulling into or coming by my front yard.
Jamie, you have never left your front yard.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's true. So I'm lying.
So, but I know that he said at maximum it could reach 300 feet, but that's in a clear line with no. I used to dabble a little bit in radios when I was in the military because I was one of the radio soldiers. And one of our biggest problems were the weather, especially snow, because it'll F up the frequencies. And you don't get a router to reach all the way down, so she could have left at 12:32 and then still be home at 12:36. Because you would have her on all those cameras that accidentally didn't pick her up on her way home either. She would be going faster than a bat out of hell. It's a 7-minute drive according to Google. It just don't make no sense.
I just noticed. The heels going across the floor in the garage were at 12:41.
Yeah.
And she's home at 12:42 according to this guy. 12:42:36 or something like that.
12:41:35 is when the phone call was made.
Didn't she? I thought. I was pretty sure I saw. No, that's the afternoon travel. I know Jemima has it somewhere. But he claims because she can't be home later than when she walks across the floor.
Well, no, she connected to the Wi-Fi at 12:36, and then she makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 phone calls before she makes the phone call. No, 6, 7. She makes 7 phone calls before you hear her heels clicking. That's the 7th phone call she made after she connected to Wi-Fi.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I
and
remember. She was blowing up the
he
phone.
claims that the power off event is 12:42:08, and he said you have to turn the engine on. So when she's walking across the floor, the car is still on, even though you can't hear it, and she goes back and turns it off.
Sounds sus.
Sounds like maybe the Lexus clock is off.
Maybe.
I can't sit through another expert like this.
Well, luckily,
Because
a
next
less
will be
shot.
Yeah.
Welsh, right? Or-
Welsh, Welsh, something. Yeah,
Welcher.
He's their trooper Paul. He's the impact reconstructionist.
Oh, I wonder if he used an exemplar on, perfectly clear pavement too.
Yeah, I think he does. Defense really should just have a timeline on closing with all the people involved and where they were and when, with a line with Google Maps direction. It's painfully obvious that nothing matches. This is the thing. No, you're wrong. You're wrong, Brandon. I bet she left it on and walked far enough away with the keys it shut off. The problem is you can hear her walk, but you can't hear the car.
It might be really quiet.
It's a 6 point something liter Lexus inside a closed garage. You would probably hear a little in the background. I'm just saying. State is bringing a crap ton of data to make it seem like a lot, but if you present it all together, it can actually backfire as nothing makes sense. Yes, and this is what the defense didn't do in the first trial. They never got to summing up. They relied way too much that people would just fall in hate with the third-party culprit defense, and none of them bought it. So they really have to shift away from that third-party culprit defense and paint a picture you can see from the moon.
Yes.
Do we know if John had hardwood floors in his house? No, but you can still hear her heels clicking across the floor.
Man.
And again, if you normally take your shoes off before entering the house, wouldn't she have done it when she was not out looking for him and in a panic because she believed he was coming home? That's what I do. Because of your gay Europeans, we have all these emission standards. Engines goes off, you go far enough away, door locks, and everything is killed. I know that, believe it or not. I have had a car with a key fob in it. But still, the problem is she goes out of the car and calls John and can be heard walking across, and everyone agrees that it's in the garage. But the car, according to this guy, is still on. That's my problem. According to this guy, the car stays on for another 30 seconds, but you can't hear it in the recording. And he said you have to press the button to make the infotainment system turn off. Again, based on his testimony, she must have pushed the button, turned the car off, gotten out of the car, called John, and started yelling at him. It doesn't mean. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But go get some dinner, lunch, wherever you are in the world. And we'll be back in... I think I set it to 1:30, but that might be wrong. 45 minutes? Yeah, I think we'll be back. I'll keep an eye on it. So, everyone, hasta luego, and see you in a little bit.
Yes, I did examine his lower extremities. That is protocol in any case of suspected impact with a motor vehicle. So I did examine his legs, and I did not see any evidence of an impact site.
Just pin it on the girl.